Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call the meeting of the Council of the City of Pickering for Monday, April the 22nd, 2013 to order. Would ask all to rise for the reading of the invocation. Creator of all, we give thanks we live in a place where all have freedom to pray. Help us to remember we are in a special place consecrated to the principles of democracy and service. Give us wisdom to perceive the right, courage to lead in times of confusion, patience to wait and listen for the hopes and aspirations of our citizens, and wit to devise creative ways of being a community. May we be as concerned for others as for ourselves, and compassionate for the needs of the less fortunate among us. Thus, may this city of ours be a special place. Amen. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. None noted.
Move the minutes.
Minutes moved by Councillor Dickerson, seconded by Councillor Pickles. Council meeting minutes of March 25, 2013. The special council meeting minutes of April the 8th, 2013. Special in-camera council minutes of April the 8th, Planning and Development Committee minutes of the same date, and the Executive Committee minutes of April the 15th. Errors or omissions? Being none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have very pleasant presentation this evening, and then a number of delegations. Moving to the presentations, we have a presentation of certificates to be done by Brian James, who is the Vice Chair of the Pickering Public Library Board. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Ryan, and esteemed members of Council. It is truly an honor and a privilege to address you tonight, this august and great body that is Pickering City Council. My name is Brian James, and I am here tonight as the Vice Chairperson of the Pickering Public Library. Now, I'm sure as elected officials and members of Council, you are no doubt inundated with people taking issue with city services, promoting one side of a council decision or another side, or advocating some sort of an agenda. And allow me to assuage your fears. I'm not here to do any of those things except maybe the latter. My primary purpose here tonight actually is to acknowledge and celebrate something that is going on in our community, and some buddies that are going on in our community that are very good, very right, and very true. As some of you may or may not know, the Pickering Public Library is one of the best libraries in the province. Now, thank you, Councillor Dickerson. But please do not take mine and Councillor Dickerson's very biased view towards that. Allow me to give some facts. For example, the Pickering Public Library is the second most recognized and awarded library system in the entire province of Ontario, second only to some Mickey Mouse backwater municipality known as the City of Toronto. Not only is this such a great service, it is a great service that is used by the majority of Pickering residents. Our number, I believe, is 53% of Pickering users use the library. We are in the top 5 per capita in the province and 3 in terms of circulation. However, our own internal research has shown that this 53% underestimates the actual people who use the library. For example, we've discovered the phenomenon where there will be one library card holder per household. So the numbers we think are 60 or 70%. This one card per household was something that was the case in my own household up until the point my mom asked me to pick up 50 Shades of Grey for her, in which case I promptly got her her own library card. Not only is this a great service used by the vast majority of Pickering residents, it is also done in a very cost-effective way. I think we've worked out that the per capita cost of the library to Pickering taxpayers is about $58, $60 per person. Now, I could give you comparisons and say that's the price of a cup of coffee every 2 weeks, that is the price of 11 pumpkin spice lattes, but all that would show is my dependence on caffeine-induced math. But that number, probably more an important analogy would be that it is the price of about 2 hardcover books per year. Now, you'll find that most library card users will use that in about a month. Now, I could continue to give you statistics, but that would not tell the full story about why we are one of the better libraries in the province. I could give you numbers on printer usage. We keep statistics for those. But what that won't tell you is that the main purpose people use library printers for is for cover letters and resumes. People who are using the library services to help contribute to our local economy by looking for work and contributing. I could tell you the number of visitors that enter the library every day, month, or year, but what that won't tell you is that most of them are young people. looking to find a safe place, a comfortable place where they can study or do work, as opposed to being out in the street. I could tell you how many people use our iHelp desk to get technological answers and advice, but what that won't tell you is the story of an East Indian new Canadian to our community who came in one day and asked for help on how to set up an email address. We taught him how to use an email address, we taught him how to use Facebook, and we taught him how to use Skype. Now he is talking, Skyping, and seeing pictures of family members he thought he would never see again. I can honestly, truly say that our library system is one of the best library systems. Recently, I was at a conference for the Southern Ontario Library System, and I can tell you without doubt, sorry to our Ajax friends, but we are the leader in this region in terms of public library service. Now, as much as we as a board, a number of us are here tonight, would love to take credit for this, a lot of it has to do with the amazing and wonderful staff that the library employs. This is a staff that frequently goes above and beyond the call of duty to serve the citizens of Pickering. That is a culture of leadership that begins at the top, and that is why I'm here tonight, to recognize and celebrate the achievements of Kathy Grant, our CEO, and Kathy Williams, our Director of Library Services. Recently, both completed a two-year certificate program by a program known as APPLE, or the Apple Institute, put on by the Southern Ontario Library Service. APPLE stands for Advanced Public Library Leadership, and its purpose is to expand leadership capacity for library CEOs and managers. This is a two-year program, very exclusive. Only 37 librarians in the entire province have completed this course. It involves, again, as I said, 2 years, 12 online courses, including intensive interactive classroom sessions so that librarians can learn from each other. Some of the courses include strategic financial management, staff development, library and its communities development, and a very important one, building new libraries. Now, this is all impressive facts, but again, facts can only tell you only a part of the story. What these facts can only tell you about their achievements, they cannot attest to the quality and the character of Ms. Grant and Ms. Williams. Well, esteemed members of council, I myself and members of the board, including our chair, Rivette Coelho, and the number of the board members that are here, we can attest to that character and that quality. We can testify to their dedication to their vocation as library service workers, their drive towards professional development, and especially their commitment to the people of Pickering. A commitment to myself, who believes in giving community service, a commitment that is inspiring. That is why it is an honor, privilege, and pleasure to come to you tonight to acknowledge the achievements of Kathy Grant and Kathy Williams and to celebrate who they are as individuals and their contribution to the city of Pickering. Are we taking a picture, or?
Brian, thank you very much. I don't know, is there something to present, or you're just making us aware, and that's great? Yes?
See my statement about acknowledgement and celebration. If you want to take a picture as a council, that would be great.
You were very articulate, and you expressed fulsomely our feelings for the library as a whole, and particularly for Kathy, who we've known and worked with for a number of years now, and we can only echo the strong endorsement that you've given here this evening and offer our congratulations collectively and individually to two people that are highly respected, regarded, and valued here in our municipality. Thank you both very much. For Brian, for you and the rest of the board that do so much to support the library, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We have a second presentation this evening that it falls to me to present, and I'm most happy to do this. And this is the presentation of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. The presentation this evening is to Mr. Tom Melamut, who is our new Director of City Planning. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Tom was nominated for his very prestigious award by his colleagues at FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, for his involvement in a number of their important projects, such as the Partners for Climate Protection Program, as well as their Sustainable Community Program. Tom played a key role in FCM, successfully advocating the importance of sustainability, community development among municipalities across Canada. His work with FCM has also been of significant benefit to the city, as it is directly linked to our own and very successful Sustainable Pickering program. Sustainable Pickering is an award-winning program that Tom helped to develop and promote Canada-wide. In 2008, Tom's work was instrumental towards the City of Pickering being awarded the FCM CH2M Hill Sustainable Community Planning Award. Although the program was launched a number of years ago, it is still very much alive and flourishing. In fact, last month we held our 8th annual Sustainable Pickering Day at the Pickering Town Center, where we introduced Celebrating Sustainable Neighborhoods, an exciting new community engagement program. Please visit our website, pickering.ca, to learn more about this program and sign up for a chance to participate. Tom, I apologize for the advertisement in the middle of your presentation. It's not often we get an opportunity to congratulate and thank one of our own for being recognized by a national organization like FCM. Although this is a very well-deserved award, Tom remains very humble and would like to share the credit. In an earlier conversation, he remarked that although the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee medals are given to individuals, the honor really belongs to Pickering staff and council for their enthusiastic support and commitment to the city's Sustainable Pickering program. Tom, congratulations once more. While you are here tonight as a special award recipient, we are all winners thanks to your efforts. Through the success of the Sustainable Pickering program, our community is a much more environmentally responsible and dynamic place in which to live, work, and play. Tom, thank you. If you come forward, we'd like to present the medal. Councillor Dickerson, would you join me as the chair of Sustainable Pickering, please? With the presentation of the medal comes a certificate, which I'd like to read. It's, dear recipient, on behalf of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I am pleased to award you the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, created to mark the 60th anniversary of Her Majesty's accession to the throne. In granting you this honor, I thank you for your dedicated service to your peers, to your community, and to Canada. The contributions you have made to our nation are most commendable and deserve our praise and admiration. I wish to convey to you the heartfelt congratulations of your fellow Canadians, to which I add my own. Signed by the Governor-General of Canada, David Johnston. Thank you. We'll move on to our delegations this evening. Remind the delegations that there is a 10-minute time limit, although I suspect that in the case of at least one, there might be an extension. Our first delegation this evening is Roger Anderson, who is the chair of the Region of Durham, for his annual address to Council. Roger, welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Go ahead. Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and members of Council. And first of all, to the two Cathys who just left, congratulations. To Tom, as a member of the Board of Directors of FCM, let me congratulate you. It's amazing how all of our jobs and businesses relate around certain people all the time. And in our job, there's a lot of Kathys. The two that were just here, Kathy Mackay, who's always telling us what to do. So I'm just glad I didn't have any girls when I was younger. So with that, Your Worship and members of council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the regional activities. And I apologize for my voice, but I've caught a bit of a cold. 2012 was an extremely busy year in which council dealt with some challenging issues relating to our democratic process and our land use planning. As you know, Regional Council and the 8 local councils worked through the triple majority process to approve the proposal to move ahead with the direct election of the regional chair starting in 2014 municipal elections. Regional Council also made a submission to the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission asking that Durham Region ridings be kept whole within our regional boundaries when the ridings are redistributed. Fortunately for us, they listened and improved the proposed riding boundaries considerably to what they originally started out as. We have a slight issue out in Clarington that we hopefully will be able to deal with before the final recommendations are dealt with. The prolonged effort to resolve the Regional Official Plan, Amendment 128, appeal finally concluded just as 2012 drew to a close. Along with other parties, the Region of Durham came to a negotiated settlement with the Province of Ontario on most of the major issues under appeal, and a vast majority of ROPA 128 has been approved by the Ontario Municipal Board. A few appeals remain on site-specific issues, but there's none of those appeals are of major concern to the Region of Durham, as we feel very confident in those that are left. This settlement, ladies and gentlemen, is good news for the residents of Durham. We now have an up-to-date official plan to support our development. And the settlement also provides clarification on some provincial policy issues affecting the development of a little municipality known as Seton. Earlier in 2013, the region, the City of Pickering, and the various landowners in Seton, including the Province of Ontario, agreed on a plan to complete the remaining outstanding studies that are the groundwork for development of a community. I believe all the partners are working in good faith to make this happen. And presently, as most people know, we are in the process of updating the Regional Development Charge bylaw, including a new area-specific development charge for Seton. That bylaw comes before Regional Council this Wednesday. The region continues to invest in the infrastructure that supports our community, and our 2013 budget includes $54.8 million for roads, $36.5 million for water, and $52.6 million for sanitary sewer. In 2012, the region invested more than $700,000 in traffic control systems at 12 locations in the City of Pickering. This includes audible pedestrian signals on Kingston Road, at Whites Road, and at Rougemount. And the region remains ready in cooperation with the city to widen Brock Road from Rossland to the CP Rail overpass at an estimated cost of some $15.2 million. And the widening of Brock Road to 7 lanes from the 401 to Kingston Road will be a complex project budgeted at $3.6 million, and it's set to go in 2013. EA and design work worth $1.1 million on 4 other Pickering Road projects will get underway in 2013 as well. In 2012, Durham Region Transit reached the 60 million rider mark. Conventional ridership is up 49% since 2006, when the Region of Durham took over regional transit. In 2013, DRT expects to carry some 11 million riders. And construction of the Highway 2 bus rapid transit system will begin this year with the creation of a BRT lane from Harwood Avenue through to Salem Road in the town of Ajax. And a soft launch of the Durham Pulse service will occur on June 29th, which happens to be the same day the GO Transit thinks they're going to start 30-minute service on the GO Transit lines. This will provide the residents of Durham Region with 7.5-minute service on buses from Highway 2 from the courthouse in Oshawa through to the Scarborough University of Toronto campus. With respect to water and sanitary sewer infrastructure, in 2012, the Region of Durham began a 10-year program to replace 20,000 polybutylene water connections, which are prematurely failing throughout the region. In 2012, we replaced almost 1,200 connections, and in 2013, we have budgeted $11.3 million to be allocated to replace another 1,800 connections, including 164 in Pickering. Our 2013 budget allocates $3 million for the twinning of sanitary sewers to accommodate growth in Pickering. $3.2 million is identified for system upgrades in the West Shore area to reduce flooding during extreme weather. On the waste management front, KPMG recognized the Durham York Energy Center as one of the top 100 global infrastructure projects for 2012. The structure is now very visible as you pass by on the 401 in Curtis. Other aspects of the project are also underway. A 4-year contract for ambient air monitoring was awarded last fall to begin this year, and public consultation on the draft community plan concluded on March 30th. Excuse me. Meanwhile, our waste diversion efforts continue. Curbside collection for bathroom porcelain and electronics piloted in 2012, I'm pleased to say, will continue in 2013. And last November, we broke a world record with our collection of the batteries for recycling. Working with local charities, we launched Reuse Days, both to boost diversion by repurposing unwanted items. And as of April 1st, 2013, our recycling list expanded once again with the addition of plastic clamshell containers, which are now eligible to go into your blue box. And we are installing rooftop solar panels at 3 Durham Region local housing seniors buildings. The new Fairview Lodge, which is now under construction in the town of Whitby, will be a LEED Silver building. And the new facility will also offer excellent care of the environment as well as the residents who live there. Throughout the year, ladies and gentlemen, programs of the Health Department continue to encourage active living and assist our residents to stay healthy by offering flu shots, the Healthy Workplace Award, the Driven to Quit Challenge, the Grade 5 Action Pass, and the Eat Smart Awards, just to name a few. And tourism projects in 2013 focused on our culinary and sport tourism attractions. The Camp X exhibit at the regional headquarters is a new attraction where people can learn about Durham's fascinating role in World War II. And the second annual Art of Transition Awards in November celebrated creativity, collaboration, and innovation in Durham with awards to 5 businesses, entrepreneurs, and artists. And 2012 was the first year of a 3-year program aimed at attracting foreign investment. Last year, we directly promoted the region of Durham in targeted foreign markets such as China and Brazil. We also continued to pursue leads through the Greater Toronto Marketing Association. Through our work with Local Diversity and Immigration Partnership Council, we are ready to welcome foreign investors and link them with supportive services and, more importantly, skilled, qualified workers. We have identified foreign companies already operating within Durham Region, and this year we'll foster closer ties with these firms to encourage them to stay and grow within Durham. And also, 2012, we conducted our first annual Durham Business Count. 66% of the Durham businesses responded, resulting in a current user-friendly profile of Durham businesses at the regional and local level. It's a great tool to use with potential investors and, more importantly, to attract economic growth and progress. Durham Region's leadership, quality of work, creativity were recognized with several awards last year, and the region of Durham received the Ontario Accessibility Award. Our Social Service Department was recognized with the Gold Award of Excellence from Excellence Canada. And we even won an award for our 2012 budget process from the North American Finance Officers Association, which says we're the best of the best. And for those of you who aren't aware, Durham Region is one of only 8 municipalities in this country that have a AAA credit rating. Unfortunately, England just lost theirs. Ontario doesn't have one. What this says is that we, the region of Durham, can borrow money cheaper than they can. What this also says is when you go to build your next recreation center, when you go to buy new fire trucks or build a new fire hall or want to build a park and you have to borrow money, well, you have to come to the region to borrow that money. And we can borrow it cheaper than anyone else can. And we can do that because we have good finances, good staff, and we watch our debt. And maybe a few provincial and federal governments and state and local governments in the U.S. and towns and cities throughout this country should follow our process. These are just a few of our highlights, ladies and gentlemen, and our success as a region are rooted in the great work done by great staff, both at the local level and at the regional level. Regional cooperation with our area municipalities and community partners are the heart and soul of this region. If we don't communicate, if we don't relate, and if we don't cooperate, we won't succeed. And the support of the citizens and the business community is vital to make that happen. I truly believe the region of Durham, as I've said on numerous occasions, is about ready for anything that the province and the federal government can do to make this place better. But they have to step up to the plate, both of them. It's time they paid attention to Durham. With that, Your Worship, I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. I do have a list. Start with Councillor Dickerson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a tough job to do, and you come out and you present the hard work that you do as regional chairman very well. Rather than go through a long litany of questions that are more appropriate at the regional level, let me just ask one, because I get asked it constantly, and I know what the latest OMB order was back from March 25th. But it's about White's Road and its extension up to become Sideline 26 in effect. And all I'm asking here is for a best guesstimate as to when we might start to see that proceed. And the question I'm asking that is because of the amount of traffic that we've got on Brock Road, notwithstanding we're going to widen it, but with the development that we see just occurring along there. As we move into Seaton in a couple of years' time, the road network obviously there is going to be extremely busy and more for construction traffic than residential traffic, obviously. Any idea when that might be proceeding, or?
It'd be best guess. There's environmental assessments to go through. There's design and tendering, etc. I'm going to say
4.
I would hope 3, but probably 4, depending on how quick the province puts their hand in their pocket.
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you so much again for appearing here this evening.
Thank you.
Councillor Pickles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your presentation. It's always great to hear the good work that you and the region are doing and present us with a few highlights. I'm going to continue on the transportation theme, and I had 3 things I was interested in. The first one is something I believe it was Mayor Ryan mentioned at our last meeting as part of our discussion on Seaton, and that is completing the connection between Taunton and Steeles. And I know a number of years ago when Mayor Miller was in place, I asked him about it. He didn't even know where it was, and I asked Howard Moscow about it, and he said, why would I spend money on a project that's just getting people from Durham onto his road? So I wonder, it takes the, I think the regional influence to get Toronto going on that. I wonder if, has the region or yourself had any recent discussions with Toronto and trying to get that link?
Every time I see a councillor from Toronto, I remind them of the amount of money they lost by not doing Steeles because the province offered them 50-cent dollars to reconstruct Steeles Avenue when we were doing Taunton Road. And it was Howard Moscow who killed that. David Miller knew where it was, but since he's in New York a lot now, he probably forgot. And Rob Ford, I know he knows where Scarborough is, so he should know where Steeles is. Maybe we should get him to drive along that road. I think the issue is now more of a Metrolinx issue, believe it or not, because if they want interconnectivity with transit, Steeles Avenue is a vital avenue for that interconnectivity. The issue with Steeles right now is a York-Toronto fight. The curb on the north side of Steeles is in York. The road is in Toronto. And Toronto's not letting York have access to that road, and they want York to pay a good chunk of the Steeles Avenue connection. I understand that the negotiations are still going on, but where it is, I don't know, but I know this. We won't be putting a dime into the City of Toronto to do their roads.
Okay, well, hopefully they'll resolve that and they will put a dime or more into that and get that project complete. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and also to Chairman Anderson. Another item that we discussed last evening, and it's in our report before us this evening, is the Whitevale bypass, and I thought that's what Councillor Dickerson was going to raise there at first. But back in 2011, I brought forward a motion, I think it was seconded by Councillor Dickerson and passed 4-3 here, to have the Whitevale Road bypass, including the bridge, included in Phase 1 of the Seaton construction. And I know on a number of occasions the answer we've heard back is that it'll be subject to environmental assessments, may not be required until as late as 2031, and would be included in Phase 2 of construction. I wonder if you can update us on that, or whether you could commit to reviewing that with your staff again and seeing if there's not a position by which we can move that project forward and get it completed earlier to avoid a number of problems we're going to have with traffic in Seaton and particularly in Whitevale.
I can certainly commit to talking to staff for you, Councillor Pickles, and I'm trying to remember if the Whitevale bypass is I'm not sure it's fixed for Phase 2. I'll have to look into that. We had great discussion over that bypass, and I'm looking for Tony to give me a nod, but the end of Phase 2? The end of Phase 2, according to Tony. I thought it was at the end of Phase 1, but I will certainly bring it up with staff, and I know how important it is to the residents of Whitevale and to this council. So if we can move things around, we'll be happy to do that.
Well, I appreciate that commitment, and as by matter of resolution, this council, it is our position that we encourage it to be built in Phase 1. So, and the third transportation project that I was interested in is the urbanization of Finch Avenue, and I continue to get a number of calls and queries about urbanizing Finch Ave, around the Altona and Rosebank area, and I get many calls as well around Valley Farm and Finch Avenue. I know that when it was looked at sometime in the past, a number of the existing landowners along Finch weren't encouraging it. But I wonder, is that something that the region is looking at again and can consider? Obviously, with the urbanization of that section, we can put in proper sidewalks and do a number of other safety improvements, as well as what we benefit from the urbanization of that. So any thoughts or timelines on that?
No.
Oh.
In fairness, I just don't know where it is in the schedule. I don't believe it's in the top. I don't believe it's in the next 5 years.
Then just to pass along to you, I have heard from a number of residents who are interested in pursuing that, or at least having the discussion with the region, and perhaps that's something I can follow up with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the delegation. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the good information. I saw you gave our CEO a copy of your notes because it was just jam-packed with achievements and so forth. That's most appreciated. I have just a few quick questions. Regarding Councillor Pickles asked the question about the Whitevale bypass, and I'm glad you said you realize it's really important to us. And it's not just for the sake of Whitevale, it's for the sake of moving traffic, dispersing traffic, so it's highly critical that we have that bridge go through. Do we know how we're going to fund it? I know I don't want to put you on the spot, 'cause I know.
Road infrastructure and the infrastructure that's needed for Seaton will be paid for by the developers of Seaton in the province of Ontario.
So we have some leverage to encourage the land developers to put that bridge through earlier rather than later?
No. They're going to pay for it, but I think they'll probably want it when they're going to be building up there as opposed to in Phase 1, which is far south of there.
Well, the bypass road is on the western end of Seaton, and that's where Phase 1 is starting. So it would seem appropriate to build it at this time.
Well, as I said to Councillor Pickles, we'll be happy to take it back and talk to them about it. The White Road connection from the south to the 407 is extensive and expensive. The Rosin Road, new Rosin Road is extensive and expensive. And they only have so many dollars from so many building permits, and we've restricted the number of building permits that they can have before they get to Phase 2.
And related to that, I remember many years ago you were here when we had the Seaton Advisory Committee meetings, and I saw you say there won't be a toilet flushing until there's some jobs up in Seaton. But many times when people have come before us regarding Seaton, they said, well, we expect the employment lands to have jobs, because as you well know, calling it employment land doesn't necessarily mean there will be jobs there. So my question would be, please, how do we ensure there will be jobs there? Or, related to that would be, how do we make sure there just isn't a lot of housing built, a lot of housing sprawling all the way over with but a handful of jobs? How do we ensure that?
I can tell you that I doubt if the City of Pickering will issue a building permit to anybody in Seaton until the pipe is in the industrial lands. If they do, or if you do, you shouldn't. Part of the agreement with the province and Seaton was that they could proceed as long as they built the pipes and the oversizing necessary to service the industrial lands. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out how long it's going to take to put a pipe into the industrial land. We know it's going to be somewhere between 24 and 30 months. I know how quick the Ontario Realty Corporation can sell a piece of land. They should start now. And if they did start now, and let's say they brought in, I don't know, somebody who owes the province a lot of money, Samsung. I think they're building windmills. They have to build 4 of these plants. 800 acres up in Seaton might be enough room for one of their plants. By the time they designed it and constructed it, they'd be ready to open their door about the same time as they're ready to hook up to the pipe. And I don't think this council would object to doing a site plan on industrial lands that aren't yet serviced but are going to be serviced so that they're ready to go. So it's not us that would hold up the construction. I know it's certainly not Pickering. If you know anybody at Queen's Park or anybody in the Ajax Pickering Board of Trade, you might want to make sure that they tell the province that it's time they started to market their land. That frontage, that land is very valuable. I think the province could do with some cash.
I thank you for that through the chair, our chair. And I understand infrastructure is a necessary first step, but even if we have the infrastructure, even if the land is sold, there's 100 acres down in South Pickering that's looking for people. There's people in the other regions in Durham and, of course, other parts of Ontario, whether it be York region.
There's nobody in the region of Durham, nobody but the City of Pickering, who is going to have the frontage on the 407 that you do. You have a prime piece of real estate that's worth a lot of money. Not only is it worth a lot of money value-wise, for any company that builds there or office that builds there, the visibility and marketing of just having their name there is worth a lot of money. Just look at what's gone on in the 407 through York and Peel. it's, you know,
Thank you. Related to transportation also, and I don't expect you to know everything about Durham. You have a vast amount of knowledge. But in terms of sideline 26, which is where the Whites Road extension goes over to sideline 26, and at present, it only runs up to Whitevale Road and it stops there at a T intersection. There's nothing going north of there. The current regional plans, and I believe the EA is not finished yet, but the current plans are to go straight through that area. And as you may or may not know, the Heritage Conservation District from Whitevale, I'm not confusing it with the Hamlet Heritage boundaries, but the actual Heritage Conservation District goes beyond the two properties that are located on the east side of Whites Road. And the plans a long time ago when we first saw them was that as the 26 came up, it would curve around and follow the lower level of the land and go around those properties and not include and try and go right through the Heritage Conservation District. And those two properties are located right adjacent to that road if they put it in there. What can we do to not have that road come through? Because whether they tunnel down, those houses will stand up and look atrocious. And whether they build up the road, and there's supposed to be some village greens there, that won't be fitting whatsoever at all. In either case, it will negatively impact the cultural heritage of Pickering, and those are prime properties. We have some correspondence that came in as well that speaks to that. And I know you're not in charge of everything at Durham Region, but what can we do to ensure one of the original plans to have the road curve to the east and go around those heritage properties and then continue back on to where they'd like to extend 26 onto and then connect up to the 407? What can you do? What can you suggest, please?
well, I think what you have to do, Councillor, is continue to follow the process, follow the EEA, make sure your comments are put forward and Council's comments are put forward, and if the public has comments, make sure their comments are put forward through the EA process so that when it comes time for the final design and location, your comments are there and they can be taken under advisement with all the others. But to me to stand here today and tell you where that alignment is going to be would not be fair because, first of all, I don't know, you don't know. There's a process to go through and we'd have to follow that process.
And do you know when that EA may be completed?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You would be well aware of it, your staff would be well aware of it, and I'd be surprised if your staff probably don't know the answers to when these start better than I do.
Yes, but and through you, Mr. Mayor, the public has made lots of comments over the last 3 years, and it was going around at one point, and suddenly it's just barreling through, and it's just, again, it's not your responsibility, but it's so inappropriate, and it feels so frustrating when residents and councillors say it's wrong, and then it occurs. I know there's other considerations, but we give lip service to heritage, and it just doesn't materialize. You know, so we will continue to fight in that regard, and I appreciate that inspiration for it. And a couple other topics. You spoke about the energy center, and as you may know, that's been a bit of a sore point for some people in the Durham area. And I remember it having another name a little while back. Wasn't it energy from waste?
That's what the whole project is, energy from waste.
Okay.
I call it an incinerator, but the actual name is the Durham York Energy Center.
And has it always had that name?
I think it has ever since we did the groundbreaking.
Is the primary purpose for incineration of garbage, or is it to produce electricity or energy?
Well, it's producing enough energy for 40,000 houses, so I'd say it's a bit of both. It's going to burn all of Durham's residential garbage and create enough energy to light up 40,000 houses.
And on to another topic, please, through you, Mr. Chair. Our AAA credit rating, it's absolutely wonderful to have it, and actually there's a financial benefit to that we get much more favorable rates. We pay less dollars in interest because we have a lower rate, so that's sincerely good. But is that also based on the fact that we pay a lot of taxes? I know in Pickering, people pay about 54% of their property tax to Durham Region. And of course, if you have lots of money, then you're in a great position. I mean, we could give any place a kind of a good credit rating if we had a lot of tax dollars coming in. So is it related to that, or could you comment, please?
Just because you have a lot of tax dollars coming in doesn't necessarily mean you have a good credit rating. You can make $150,000 a year and still declare bankruptcy. So it's not how much money's coming in, it's how much money's going out, how much money is planned to go out, and how are you budgeting for future expenditures. The region does it better than anybody.
Very wise fiscal management. That's good for now. I thank you very kindly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I disagree with Councillor Rodriguez there. You do know everything about the region. I've never seen you stumped. And I hope this question isn't going to do it. In regards to the York sewer pipe, is there a communication policy in place in the event of an accident to notify the region and the city? Is there something in place that you're aware of?
Well, there was one. There's a better one now, as of last week. But it's a York regional contract. The communication with us would be to them probably secondary to dealing with whatever the emergency is. We, and I assume most of you, would not look at it as secondary. You want to know the minute it happens. I had quite a few problems with what happened. Not only did our EMS not communicate, our police didn't communicate, York didn't communicate, although I understand Bill Fish and Mayor Ryan had a discussion. But I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to knowing what's going on in Durham, and so a lot of people have changed a lot of rules as a result.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm of the same mind. I'm a little bit of a stickler of things that not only happen in the region, but what happens within the boundaries of the city of Pickering. So there is a process in place, York to you, you to the city, and
Well, in the case of an emergency like what happened with the York pipe, it would be staff to staff, and then staff would spread it out to the people that they need. In Bill's case, Bill knows that the first call should have been to the mayor, but the second call should have been to me, and he understands that today.
I'm happy to hear that kink has been fixed, and I'm sure our staff and our mayor will notify us as he normally does whenever there's an incident in Pickering. So I'm happy to hear that. Is the investigation still going on from the Ministry of Labor?
I believe it is. I haven't heard any results, and I don't think the tunnel's open yet. If I'm not absolutely sure, Councillor McLean, but I don't believe it is. So.
Okay, and will we be privy to any of that investigation as to what happens, results, causes? That be public?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know the rules with the Minister of Labor. If it's
Did I trip
Minister
you up
of
there? Is there
Labor
something
to
that
the
you don't know?
company, no. But I don't know how much information the Minister of Labor can give us, because they're dealing with a company, and the fault, if there is any, is between the Minister of Labor and the company. I'm going to assume that the Minister of Labor understands the partnership involved in this and will disseminate that information appropriately. What they're allowed to do and say, I don't know, though, and that's the problem. It's not York that's doing this, it's a company. It's not Durham that's doing this. So we're really not a party, but we are a party. So we're nosy and we want to know. That's
Okay.
the best way of describing it.
That's great. Thanks very much.
To Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you, through the mayor, to the chair. The Duffin outfall EA, on Tuesday at Finance Committee, I asked Commissioner Curtis with the development charge bylaw and what's been allocated for the outfall as a placeholder, in a worst case scenario in terms of potential costs. I asked about the potential for the tertiary treatment, and I was told that tertiary will never happen. So based on the commissioner's comments, how can this council feel comfortable with an EA process if we're hearing that one of the alternatives is being ruled out before the EA is complete?
Well, first of all, I wasn't at the finance meeting, so I don't know exactly what Mr. Curtis said, but there are some things that Mr. Curtis can say that council can overturn, which is most things. If council wanted to spend more money on something, they have every right to do that.
So the 20% that Durham Region would be responsible for? It's
Well,
80% would, for construction would be from York. That's how it's been broken down in the DC bylaw. From both bylaws, from York Region and Durham.
If York isn't willing to pay, then you might have a problem.
If the EA concludes that that's what's
Then
needed.
York would have to pay whatever share their share is.
Now, following up on that, Commissioner Curtis said that Phase 3 of the plant expansion is being built in a way that does not allow for tertiary treatment, and that's why he said it would never happen. So again, how can we feel comfortable in this EA process if some of the options are actually being built in an opposite way, or the structure of the expansion right now is being built in a way that will not allow for it? Is there anything else that we should be concerned about not being a real viable option in this EA?
I don't think there's anything you have to be concerned about in the EA process in regards to Duffins. I think it's very thorough, it's very public. The Minister of Environment is following it very closely. I don't think there's anything in that process that's a concern to me.
Thank you. And just finally on the same subject, there have been concerns, and this council has even taken a resolution similar to Ajax in regards to the studies that have gone into the work and the questions that are still unanswered. However, the region has stated that they will not be holding up the EA for the ministry's other study or to do a cumulative assessment. But with that being said, Durham Region is on the hook for the EA for 50%, correct?
That's correct.
And 20% of construction. Therefore, if Ajax and potentially Pickering request that the EA be bumped up, wouldn't the region be on the hook then for the 50% of the costs versus doing the work through the EA now?
No, if you want to request a bump up, you can go ahead. The region's not going to support it. We don't think the region would be forced to do it through the Minister of Environment either. We believe we've done everything proper. We believe we've done it more than what's required. And we think that the Minister of Environment and others would agree with us. So if you want to ask for a bump up like Ajax says they're going to do before the EA is even finished, you can go ahead and do that. We're not going to support you, and we're not going to support you in a bump up at all.
But if the minister requires it,
Then
the
we don't
region
have
would
a
have
choice.
to pay for it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then final question on a different subject. Similar to Councillor McLean's questions in terms of communication, The nuclear alerting sirens were tested last week. First time even I could hear them at Whites and Finch in my house. So they're definitely working now. The problem was with some of the communication from the region. I had residents calling, not sure if it was just a test or not. They couldn't find the information on the region's website. The schools, they contacted the local high school. They only received notification at 11 a.m., but the testing had happened at 9:30 or 9 in the morning. So what's the protocol in terms of using the region's, the website, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, and alerting the area, whether it's schools or us here? I know we were notified, but in terms of a hotline, something that's available for communication for a resident to pick up the phone and find out if it's a test or not.
I'll be surprised to find that staff didn't give notice or publications or newspaper ads about the testing of the sirens, but I'll follow up with you and find out. I'd be really surprised if a school got notice an hour and a half after the event. Have that principal call me.
I will. And there was notification in the news advertiser. There's no question about that. But if there are some areas that don't have delivery of that, or, you know, if people don't see it, and they actually want to find out what's in place. And one of the other things that took...
Was it on your website?
It was on the city's website from my understanding, but they went to the region. It was in the, okay, linked to the region. The region, actually the resident called the region, and the region staff directed them to OPG's media, and OPG's media didn't know what was going on. So we need to look into a better communication protocol, because this resident, I think, made about 8 phone calls before they found out it was just a test.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ash?
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, Mr. Chair. 2 questions, or 2 topics. One is in regards to the Ontario Lottery Corporation modernization procedure. Ajax, Pickering, Whitby have all indicated about being willing hosts. Pickering and Whitby certainly have made noise about a revenue sharing arrangement, which may include some monies to the region. Could you comment about your desire, appropriateness, willingness?
I'm not supporting anybody who doesn't give the region any money, period. I won't support anyone. And whichever one of yous do, you got my vote, publicly.
Okay, well, certainly discussion around, discussion certainly in Pickering talk about a sharing between all levels of government.
I have a real problem with the region providing EMS service, police service, social services, and all the other services that go with gambling, and domestics and bankruptcy, and I can give you 100 items. And I think Ajax provides fire service. So they use our roads, they use our traffic lights, they use our entry off our roads. It just makes no sense. So
you
want a casino? Come see me. Tell me how much you'll give us.
You and I agree on revenue sharing then. My second question is, the Minister of Finance of the province today announced his budget for next week, and he spoke about his desire or his intent to introduce revenue tools for transit, which may include tolls, may include property taxes, may include all kinds of things. Has the region, or have you as leader of the region taken a position in regards to how that might impact Pickering residents as well as Durham residents?
Well, we've got a paper out on some of the tools. We don't support property taxes, period, cut and dried. If Toronto needs more money, they should raise their property taxes. But there's got to be revenue tools. We understand that. There's got to be something. But if you, depending on how they do it and where they collect the money from, would be significant. If you look at the 905 and 416 today, and how much money from the 905, 416 goes into Queen's Park, and that money is dispersed across the province. So if they're going to do a tax, then it best be a province-wide tax and not a 905, 416 tax. Or then take the 905, 416 portion that we give Queen's Park today and spend it just in the 905, 416. But whatever they do, they better be providing better service than what they are today. And it better be in Durham. Because if you're going to send your tax dollars to Queen's Park for transit, you might want to make sure it's in Durham. As you know, Go Transit announced 30-minute train service the other day. That's great news. Good thing they built a car parking garage, because there's not going to be bus service there every 30 minutes. So the only way you're going to take advantage of it is if you drive your car to the GO train. Well, I don't know if that's the purpose that they're trying to defeat. So, but they're going to have a nice garage to park in, which you'll probably have to pay to park in. And then you'll have to decide whether you want to pay for parking and the GO train, because we can't afford the bus. We can't afford the capital, and we can't afford the operating. And that's one of the big problems with the big move. And when the regional chairs, myself included, approved and put together the big move, we told Queen's Park 7 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, that this isn't going to work unless there's some operating money to deal with it. And you can't double the transit service to a GO train station in Pickering or Ajax or Whitby or Oshawa and not tell us in advance to prepare for it. And Friday, when they announced it, and they want to start this on June 29th, well, we've approved our budgets already. And I'll look at the 3 regional councillors. Are you prepared to put out an extra assessment notice for the residents of the town of Pickering to provide more bus service? I'm going to say no. And I'm pretty sure Oxbridge, Brock, and Scugog aren't going to be willing to pay more taxes for you to get more bus service, because they're not getting another tire. So this is a great announcement, as long as you drive your car to the GO train and don't get upset over the construction or the traffic congestion, which is what they're trying to get rid of.
Just one follow-up question. You mentioned the disparity of tax revenue from a Toronto taxpayer to a Durham taxpayer. I think a Toronto taxpayer pays 64% of what a Durham taxpayer pays only 83% of what a Peel region taxpayer talks about. I think I heard you say that revenue should be generated first in the City of Toronto before it goes out to 905. Did I hear you correctly?
Well, I think Toronto has a responsibility to, look, Toronto is the hub. Everyone understands that. But that hub doesn't work without the spokes. And I hate to say it, but all the spokes are in the 905. Toronto would be bankrupt if it wasn't for us going into Toronto, spending money, or working. Period, cut and dried. The traffic congestion isn't cars from Toronto going into Toronto. The traffic congestion is from the 905 going into Toronto to work. So maybe what they should do is focus their transit initiative where the biggest problem is, in the 905. Put a GO train at Bowmanville, Curtis, even Newtonville, so you can pick up Coburg and Port Hope and see how many cars you take off the road. It would be huge. But let's build a subway in Toronto, because after all, we're going to take a GO train into Union Station so we can walk up the steps to get onto Front Street to take a bus to go to Eglinton. Ain't going to happen.
Thank you.
Chair Anderson, thank you very much. As always, it's most interesting, insightful, and I don't think they did stump you, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. We'll see you Wednesday at the region. Thank you. Our next delegation was to be Rick Anderson, President and CEO, and David Brazo, Director of Public Affairs for the Rouge Valley Health System, with their annual update. Unfortunately, Mr. Anderson is ill this evening, but David, we're glad that you're able to be here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having the hospital here. Again, we try to come once a year and give you an update, an opportunity to ask any questions you wish. Roger's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. We have a slide presentation, which what I'll do is highlight and then welcome any questions you have at all. So what I'll do is talk a little bit just in general about the hospital.
David, if you just go through your presentation, try and do it in 10 minutes, and then we'll ask whatever questions we have. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Mayor. And I'll go through some investments, a little bit about the Scarborough Cluster Hospital Integration Planning that's started, and then talk about some of the solutions and successes at the hospital. So some of the things about us you will know very well, so I'll just highlight a few of the sort of the newer points. So you know we're a two-site hospital, obviously. Ajax and Pickering has been one that has received a lot of investment from the province and from the hospital itself in the last 5 years. And all of that is adding up to better service. It's adding up to lower wait times while we experience tremendous growth. I don't think I have to tell anyone here about that. In Durham, just tremendous amount of growth. Scarborough continues to grow as well, but percentage-wise, we in Durham are growing much faster. In raw numbers, it's pretty similar, actually, which is pretty interesting. The hospital has received a 4-year exemplary accreditation standing, and that is something that occurred a few months back. We got a, let me think now, 96.5, I think it was. So I don't remember scoring that well on anything in high school or after, but our staff and our doctors did that, and it was a national accredited rating. Recently, we also had a lot of really good news I think that's important for you to know about, and that was through the Canadian Institute for Health Information. The CBC crunched some numbers from that national organization, and they rated hospitals across the country, giving 20 of the hospitals in Canada an A rating. I'm very happy to tell you that the doctors, staff, and volunteers at both Rouge Valley Hospital sites earned an A from the CBC, and they, like I said, they didn't give too many of them out. I think in the GTA there were 2. And Rouge Valley was one of them, and that A rating went to both sites of the Rouge Valley Health System. Here, I'll just skip through a few other things. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of our investments, and I think key to them, and really we couldn't have expanded the way we have in the last 4 years without the tremendous support of this community and West Durham at large, and without the support of this council in particular. We just wouldn't have some of the terrific services and equipment that we have in the hospital. So key among them, of course, is the magnetic resonance imaging scanner, to which the city provided a $500,000 support, which was tremendous. We saw that from other sectors as well, and there I'm talking about the region of Durham, who have supported us tremendously as well over the last few years. And that has really gone into just some essential pieces of equipment, things that the hospital both funds itself, because it isn't funded separately for that, and which we raise in fundraising campaigns that the community supports as well. You know that we're leaders in mental health, so I think I'll just scan over that, and I'll leave that with you. This slide presentation is also on our website for the public to have a look at, as we always do. We're leaders in cardiac care as well, and that's something that is region-wide. And when I say region-wide, I'm not just thinking of Durham. It actually stretches well into Scarborough and our Centenary site there. We offer cardiac care and cardiac diagnostic services at both sites, and that is something that has benefited the residents of Durham at large, particularly at Ajax Pickering, and even into Bowmanville, where we've had patients come from there having a heart attack, We know one fella came to us, his name was Gary McCormack, and he was quite okay with me using his name. And he had a heart attack about 3 years ago. In fact, he had 3 of them one day, and his wife called 911, came in to see us via, first, of course, EMS, and then was brought into the Centenary site from his home hospital site, which would have been Lake Ridge, Oshawa, and was treated within a crucial 90-minute time window. And today he walks 2.5 miles a day, enjoys his grandchildren, and enjoys life because of that really crackerjack team that we have of about a dozen cardiologists and related staff who are ready at a moment's notice to take care of someone's emergency like that. And that service continues to grow and is really one of our flagship programs at the hospital for which we're regionally designated. We've had a few other perhaps lower ranking successes, and I say that because the cardiac program is really tremendous. But we've had some really interesting developments lately, and one of them was an idea that one of our staff members came up with at the Ajax and Pickering Hospital site, and that was to make use of Skype. Maybe use Skype to talk to some of your family members in other jurisdictions, and it's pretty good most of the time. And if you have a good internet connection, it's actually great. Well, what we found was people don't need to drive in for each and every follow-up appointment after surgery. So this staff member said, let's give this a try. And what we do is we give instructions to a patient when it's appropriate to come in and do their follow-up via Skype. So they don't have to drive in, and they can do it from the convenience of their own home. And it's been working really, really great. And we're doing it at both hospital sites now, but it started and was piloted at the Ajax and Pickering site. Also at the Ajax and Pickering site is something called the Prehabilitation Clinic, or Prehab. And what that does is gets people in shape before their surgical procedure so that, one, they're stronger, and they might start getting in shape with us through rehabilitation about 3 months before a surgical procedure. So they're stronger when they have that procedure done, and they're able to recover more quickly and get back to their lives more quickly. So that was another clever thing that one of our staff members suggested, and it's worked out really well for patients. I won't run through all of the wait times and so on with you, but what I do want you to know is that in the last 5 years, wait times have dropped. So even though we have a lot more people coming to see us than we did 5 years ago, and particularly at the Ajax and Pickering site, they're being seen a lot more quickly for things like cancer surgery, hips and knee procedures, and for MRIs. Wait time volumes in our emergency department, you can peruse the numbers there, but they've increased over the years quite dramatically, especially at Ajax and Pickering, where we went from about 53,000 emergency department visits a year to now more than 60,000. And that's sort of a magic number in a way, because when we opened the new and greatly redeveloped and much larger and more modern emergency department 3 years ago, actually almost 4 years ago in 2009, it was rated for 60,000 visits. So the community's growth and demands on that emergency department have now matched what it's rated for. So that tells you a lot about the growth that's going on in Pickering, Ajax, and Durham at large. Despite that, they're not having to wait any longer. In fact, they're waiting a little bit less to be seen. So I've already done a little bragging about the recognition, so I won't run through that. It was a great phone call to get, though. The CBC doesn't usually call you up out of the blue for good news, so that was a nice surprise. I've talked to you before about the action plan for healthcare, and I would just advise the public to have a look at our website if you want to know more about it. What I did want to highlight for council was something that's developed that's related to that particular province-wide initiative to improve healthcare and improve how the tax dollars are spent in healthcare. And that is the Scarborough Cluster Hospital Services Integration Plan. It's quite a mouthful, but it relates to the Centenary side of the Rouge Valley House. So Centenary is our campus in Scarborough at the corner of Ellesmere and Nielsen. And it has been included in an overall plan from the Central East Lynn, which funds our hospital and others in the area, to do, I guess, two things primarily. And they passed 3 motions about 2.5 weeks ago. And the first one was just directing the Scarborough Hospital, which is sort of down the street from Centenary, if you will, several kilometers, to stop some planning it had on the way and to develop a partnership with us, Rouge Valley Health System, in a variety of areas. Firstly, in the maternal, child, and youth services. And again, this impacts the Centenary campus. And that's something that's been on the books for years, since '09. Things often develop, unfortunately, rather slowly in healthcare. And so this is them prodding, really, hospitals to get on with an integrated service model for that. You might know that Centenary had a major development about 6 years ago for its birthing and newborn center. And so that's one of the things we're very proud of, and we have an NICU there and so on and so forth. The second motion was strictly related to Scarborough Hospital itself. The third motion that was passed on that day in the LHIN's public board meeting required it to effectively and immediately partner with Rouge Valley in a facilitated integration planning process. So that would include the integration of services, back office functions, and leadership. We have about between now and September to come up with a plan, an overall plan, and present that to the LHIN. What I want you to know is that Ajax and Pickering, it remains part of Rouge Valley, regardless of what the outcomes are of the Scarborough planning process. We remain 100% committed to our Ajax and Pickering site, and I think you can see evidence of that if you've walked into the hospital in the last few years. You might have noticed the great expansion there, and I thank members of council for coming to the many different openings and the major openings that we've had over the last while. $94.5 million in the redevelopment itself, which was from '08 to '11. The new MRI, which we opened in 2011, and that was good for a $5 million investment. Interestingly, the community really rallied behind the hospital and made that possible. But because of the hospital's really strong financial position and the fact that we generate surpluses every year, we were able to move that MRI into the building almost a year ahead of schedule because we could pay for it up front while the fundraising continued. And so that's the benefit of having an organization that's well run and that is fiscally prudent with the limited tax dollars that we have. I think really the main things I should just highlight to close off here would be that we're working on a lot of solutions that deal with the changing paradigm in healthcare, and that is very limited tax dollars available to us. I'm sure we're not alone in that. I think council will be quite familiar with that theme, but one that was precipitated by the global financial crisis of '08 and lingers with us today. So what it comes down to is we have to maintain or increase our service volumes, increase our quality, and do it all at a lower cost to taxpayers. It's something we've become quite good at. Our doctors, staff, volunteers have really become good at becoming more efficient, and we have a variety of initiatives underway to do that. Chiefly, well, one of the main ones of them, I think, is collaborative care, and that really makes the best use of our staff so that they can work to the maximum scope of their abilities. Without going into detail, it would be the sort of thing that a nurse decided to go into nursing for, so that person would be coming to work and doing the things that they were specifically trained for and the things that motivate them every day. So it helps with team spirit as well.
To wrap up, please, Dave.
And I'll close it off right there, Mr. Mayor. Know how to take a hint.
Thank you. We have a number of questions, and I'm sure members of council have followed along and will fill in any blanks that, for us. Starting with Councillor Rash.
Thank you, Worship. I have 2 questions. You commented about the Scarborough situation, and there's nice words being used like partnerships and delivery models and integration and function and governance. Sounds like amalgamation to me. Perhaps you can comment on that, about having a Scarborough corporation. Could you speak to the appropriateness or the desirability of having a Durham Hospital Corporation if, in fact, there's a Scarborough corporation that involves Scarborough Ajax or Rouge Valley Centenary and Rouge Valley Ajax Pickering? Can you speak to that issue?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. one of the things I want you to know is, so when we use words like integration planning process, yeah, it does sound like quite a mouthful, but it does not mean merger necessarily. It could. So what it tends to mean is a bunch of different services provided at each hospital coming together under one structure. So it could be just a handful of them, or it could be an entire merger. We actually don't know how far the LHIN is interested in going, and in fact the LHIN really wants the hospitals to drive that process. On the Durham side of the house, I haven't heard any interest expressed doing that from the provincial government or the LHIN level, and my board of directors hasn't made any comment on that, and in fact it isn't on the table as far as I know. What I can tell you is that the Rouge Valley merger of 1998 that brought in Ajax and Pickering with Centenary in Scarborough, it's taken a long time to really work, but it's working really great right now. We have some great successes, lower readmission rates, lower infection rates, higher and higher volumes of people coming, getting greater and greater care, and finally, even accolades for the staff and the doctors. So that particular experiment, if you want to call it that, and that's when many hospitals in Ontario were merged in '98, is working, and there's just been a lot of tremendous work that our team have done for the community since then.
Thank you. One final question. Elsewhere at our agenda tonight, there's a discussion about parking charges at our hospitals, and the comments you made tonight about 5 years of surplus, could you tell me how much profit or how much revenue from parking charges go into the operation of either Ajax Pickering or Centenary or both?
Yes, Councillor.
And profit or after costs, what, do you have a dollar figure?
Yes, I do, Councillor. And I can tell you that at each site we charge for parking, like I guess every hospital does now and has for years. We generate about $4.5 million a year at both hospital sites, so at Rouge Valley, Ajax, and Pickering, and at Centenary as well. That goes into medical equipment. It goes into maintaining facilities. Less interesting things included. By that I mean an MRI is a fascinating thing to fundraise for. A boiler, not so much. Electrical upgrades, not so much. Fixing up the parking lot, again, harder to get out there and generate money from the public. So we tend to invest in our facilities with that parking revenue. So about $4.5 million a year, and we have capital needs of about $10 million a year. So it certainly doesn't fill the gap by any stretch, and our capital list is probably conservative to begin with.
Just to some clarity then, the $4.5 million is a gross number. What's the cost to operate a parking lot with people writing tickets and security and machinery and tokens and the like? What's the gross or net revenue that goes in the corporation after the expenses? Do you know that number?
That specificity, I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that we use security and parking staff to maintain the things you were just talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Worship, and my question was going to be geared around the parking also. And I was at a charity foundation fundraiser the other night, the Jennifer Ashley Foundation, and talking to the executives there, money raised from an organization like that, there's quite a bit of that money that goes to parents who are taking their kids to hospital to supplement the parking. Is there any process or policy in place at any hospitals to assist people that aren't of means to supplement them when they're going to park?
I know that the province of Ontario has some programs. I don't know how they
There's
all
lots
relate.
of programs out there. I'm talking about the hospital. Does the hospital have any policies to assist people in need who, quite often when somebody's got a sick child or mother, they have to quit work and funds are limited and they're driving to the hospital on a daily basis for a variety of reasons. Is there any mechanism in place that from your hospital to assist people like this?
The hospital doesn't have a specific program, but there are programs in the community, you may have heard of them, community-based programs that can help people drive to the hospital. There are Home at Last programs and that sort of thing, organized through the Central East Lynn and others.
I heard that, and you know, I was surprised that a foundation like Jennifer Ashley, where money has to go to parking as opposed to other resources and families that are in need. Getting back to the parking tickets, and I'm sure you saw the CBC story dealing with the parking tickets at hospitals and the issues and concerns surrounding that. Do you have a private security company doing tickets at the hospital, and what happens to those funds? Do they go back to the hospital, or is that retained by the security company?
You know, we don't do a third-party arrangement like you saw on the CBC. When we hand out tickets, that revenue returns to the hospital. I know that we don't hand out a whole lot of tickets. We actually generate most of the money strictly from people paying to park at the hospital.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dickerson.
Thank you, Your Worship. David, I hate to belabor the point, but it seems to...
Oh, go ahead.
So, again, let me start over, David.
Can you speak there?
Okay.
Good, okay.
David, my apologies for belaboring this point on the parking, but it's a comment that comes up quite often, and I hear it is, in fact, most recently with the Legion on Saturday when we were honoring our vets and our members for things that they do. And I got into that discussion with a couple of them. And I held to the point, and I'd just like you to correct me if it's wrong, that people who visit family or friends in the hospital, it has the beneficial point to, of course, that patient, and that there have been studies done numerous times that show that patients who regularly have visitors and that their stay tends to be shorter than other patients who are in the identical situation but have no one coming. Having said that, does the cost of that shorter period, I'm sorry, the cost of that longer period stay in the hospital, doesn't that far outweigh what it would bring in the revenue stream? And following just to the Councillor McLean's point, from those people who tell me that they can no longer afford to go every day to visit whether it's a friend, a family member, whatever. They just simply can't afford to do it, whether that's by transit or whether that's more to the point by car and paid for parking. You mentioned there might be a provincial program that assists those in need.
So, sorry, can you hear me?
There we go. Sorry, Dave, go ahead and start again, please.
Okay. So, yeah, there are forms, there are ways that people and families can come to hospitals, and there are programs that help take them home and that sort of thing. In terms of family members coming to hospital and parking at the hospital, we don't have a special program there except for regular visitors. Let's say someone's in the hospital for a long time, and those parking charges can add up, and they're not cheap. And so what we've done is we have in and out passes, so people don't have to pay every single time. We also have passes for a week and that sort of thing. So that minimizes the cost, but it's still, again, it isn't cheap, and hospitals wouldn't charge it if they didn't need the money, quite frankly. No one needs the headache that goes with it, but it does go into some really essential stuff. And it goes into needed medical equipment. It goes into maintaining our facilities, as I said. And believe me, we wouldn't want to continually be the subject of media articles on the woes of parking. I mean, you see council's interest on it. We spoke about cardiac care. We spoke about MRIs. but we're talking about parking more than anything, aren't we?
Well,
and
then-
it's,
then
so
let-
it's
then let me-
something we know is very important, but it's something we also know we need to charge for, because $4.5 million does represent something important to the patients and residents of the community, and that is why we do have parking charges.
Yeah, the issue resonates in the community and is brought up quite often. Let me go back to the other one. I saw from 90 some odd days, I think, down to 77 days, the wait time for an MRI. And yet I was under the impression, very much so at the start and during that campaign, that if we had an MRI out here and everybody contributed, our wait time would probably be down to about a week. Now, where, why, or how that got started. But why would that MRI wait time not be significantly lower if that is operating 16 hours a day?
Yeah, so two things there. Firstly, that number, if memory serves, was for both sites. So it's for the Ajax and Pickering site and the much older MRI. That's still a great device at the Centenary site. And secondly, the MRI here at the Ajax and Pickering Hospital site, it operates 40 hours a week. And that's what we're funded to operate it on. And as demand increases, and I think we've already made the request, and I'm sure we will again, to increase those hours to meet the demands and the growing demands of our community.
But if you have a wait time that now exceeds 2 months, would that not indicate that we have a lot of patients that are still needing that MRI? You're saying if that need increases, why would I want to see a need increase when I can already see it's taking over 2 months? That would
It's certainly a long wait
signify to me
already,
the need's
Councillor.
there.
Yes, I agree with you.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the delegation, thank you very much for all the information. I know you could have spoken much longer, a lot more details. Parking, I'm not going to talk about that. But I do want to talk about the wait times. I'm glad Councillor Dickerson raised it. And it catches my eye all the time. We spend a fortune for this machine, and it's used 40 hours a week, which means about 80% of the time it's not being used because it's 168 hours in a week. And here's my theory. Catch up, and then you'll always stay at that delayed rate. And I know you've made some progress from 2007. The machine came in 2011. So, and I know there's different factors. I know you need funding, but the point is, if any one of us was on the waiting list, and I know they do try to take super critical cases perhaps ahead of the ones that, I don't want to say the wrong way, can bear to wait, but it's just nuts. If I had to have something done, and you tell me come back in 2 months, 3 months?
Councillor, question.
Yes, that's my question. How would you feel, and what can we do?
Well, I agree with you, and I think Councillor Dickerson raised a really good point too. The demands on MRI services far outstrip what we're able to offer in Ontario, not just at Rouge Valley. So yeah, I think there is a lot of pressure, and I think there's a great argument to be made for increasing those hours. And that will no doubt have to be measured and weighed with all of the other demands on the healthcare system. And that conversation occurs at a level far above mine and far outside of the hospital. But I certainly hear you, and I really agree with you that there is a great demand for more MRI service. Still, it's much better than not having an MRI at the hospital. So I also do really want to be careful to note the donations of the community and to thank the community for that, and to also make a note that the government also agreed to make that investment along with us and with you. So we have made a great improvement, and there's more to be done in terms of wait times and MRIs.
And the MRI at Centenary is used how many hours per week, roughly?
I don't know off the top of my head. I do know it's more than 40 hours a week. And, you know, we have some catch-up to do at this site. And again, it relates to how many hours per week we are funded to run it, to staff it, is what it comes down to.
Yes, and I can appreciate that. And here's what I'm thinking, and it is a question, actually. We buy a whole nother machine when we're not fully utilizing the first machine. Couldn't we just have used that operating cost to use the first machine a whole lot more? I know you'd have to transfer people around, and that's definitely an inconvenience, but why would we invest $5 million when we're not utilizing what we've got already?
Well, two reasons. One, the other machine you speak of is in Scarborough at Centenary, and this community very much needed its own MRI, in-hospital MRI. There's no doubt about that. Secondly, the amount of hours remaining that is left unused at the Centenary site wouldn't nearly meet the demand of Ajax, Pickering, and West Durham. So that's why it's there. So again, it is a really huge step forward. And yes, there's certainly more demand on it, and we hope that that demand will be met.
And I can appreciate those aspects of people wanting something local, or even in-hospital people needing to use the machine. They've discovered something new, have to be retested. So I can appreciate the pragmatics. It just seems. My next issue is the offloading delay. EMS vehicles are tremendously expensive. A couple of EMS staff, personnel trained, terribly expensive as well. I know there has been some more provincial money available to enable them, but those people are stuck waiting at the hospital, and it's not like, oh, the truck won't wear out and we can use that EMS vehicle. We have a lifespan of those vehicles, and if we don't use it up, we got to get a new one. Just that's the rules. So the question is, what can we do to not have them wait around and cost millions of dollars? Is there no way to get people into the hospital faster? Again, it's like MRI. How long can you wait? I mean, you got to go in. You're planning to go in. It's not like you're going to change your mind. It's too late, or you know.
Do you have an answer, David?
In fact, our hospital, and specifically our Ajax and Pickering site, has greatly improved offload times. And I think it was last summer that the Central East Lynn announced funding for that. And that was because we were doing pretty darn well to begin with. And what I mean by that is the government very much wants to reward good performance and to make that grow in the province. So they gave us some more funding a year ago to improve offload times, and that was because of the great performance by our staff and our doctors in that offload time. And that translates into the emergency department itself, where now people are waiting less, despite the fact that there are many more of them.
Well, that's good news, and I look forward to more of that, because what we don't have to spend on EMS, we could spend on offload people, and perhaps wouldn't cost us anything else. We get more people through the door. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. David, just a couple of quick questions. First of all, a comment. Congratulations, because as I read through the slides on the Scarborough Cluster Hospital Services, on the bottom of the slide with the motions on it, the last bullet says leadership and or governance, and I think really what the Central East Lynn has done is acknowledge the great strides that have been made in the Rouge Valley Health System, and in fact has acknowledged the RVHS as a model that others should aspire to. So congratulations, and please take that back from me, and I hope from the other members of council. On the question of the MRI, I think it's important. And I heard you say it, but I want everybody to hear you say it. The MRI operates on the hours that are funded by
The provincial government.
the which?
Are funded by the provincial government, yes.
Provincial government. So when the MRI campaign was underway and was ultimately successful, the provincial government made a significant announcement, for which we were all very pleased, for a certain level of operating support, operating cost. But they have not increased that?
It hasn't been increased in that 2-year time period. I guess it is about
Right.
2 years
so,
now.
But the RVHS is, hopefully, lobbying through the Lynn, the provincial government, to have more operating dollars given to the MRI.
Yes, frankly, and thank you for raising the profile of that conversation tonight.
Right. Okay. Now, just again on the MRI, the question of wait times. There are any number of hospitals across the GTA in particular that have MRIs. How do the wait times at Rouge Valley compare to the other systems?
Well, that's a really good question. And I know that ours have improved, and I know that we're by no means in the bottom part of that list, but I don't have specifics for you, Mayor Ryan. I don't know exactly where we sit. I can
I'd like
certainly...
to think they compare favorably.
I believe that we do.
There's one hospital in particular that I could name, but since you don't know the answers, I won't ask the question. But, you know, a hospital that's sitting with 9 MRIs, you know, I suspect still has a wait time associated with that particular procedure. So I'll leave it at that. And
Thank you.
I thank you very much for what the hospital has done and continues to do in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Mr. Bill Zolas, representing the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade with their annual update. Bill, I see some of your executive actually hung in, so you might want to introduce them.
We always, is it the saving the best to last? We'll see. I don't know if I'm the last, but Your Worship, Mayor Ryan, honorable council members, city staff members, and members of the public. Good evening. My name is Bill Zolas, and it's a privilege to stand before you this evening to represent the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade as the 2013 president. Thank you for the opportunity to bring you the annual update on the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade. I bring you greetings from our council chair, Gary Strange, and all other members of council, and in particular, our Government Relations Committee, which is co-chaired by Joan Weidman and Tracy Patterson. I'm attending tonight's council meeting along with my fellow Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade council members, 2013 Chair Gary Strange of First Term Insurance and Financial Limited, Judy Gaw of Eco Environment Plus, and I'm also joined by Kathy Mackay, our Executive Director and Mother Hen, right? As Roger would call you, right? We are a council of 14 business volunteers and 2 municipal advisors, representing a diverse range of industry type and company sizes. These volunteers have been elected by the broader membership to lead the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade organization, and I'm grateful for their energy, engagement, and expertise. We have enjoyed a strong cooperative relationship with the City of Pickering and are grateful for the involvement of senior staff from the city in our work. I've had the pleasure of working with Lynn Winterstein and Catherine Hodge, and I thank you, Mayor Ryan, for the opportunity to work with such talented and dedicated staff members. As the 44th president of this organization, I can tell you this Board of Trade has been the local voice of business for over 58 years. And we continue to operate our business professionally, with integrity, transparency, fiscal responsibility, and accountability to our members. I must take a moment to mention that we have no formal affiliation with the newly branded Toronto Region Board of Trade. Notwithstanding their newly staked claim to the 905, they do not speak for us, did not consult with us, nor represent the interests of our local business community. For more than 5 decades, we have been the voice of business in this community, and may I say as president, but first and foremost as a member, that this board has been an effective voice for business in West Durham. This is evidenced by our advocacy efforts that focus on the issues that matter most to local business and our board's general engagement with the community. Our board provides a wide variety of benefits to our members, and through our proud affiliation with the Ontario Chamber and Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we are part of a network of 190,000 businesses, coast to coast, each committed to free enterprise. We were the proud recipient of the most recent Durham Business Times Reader's Choice Award for Best Networking Group in Durham, and we strive daily to continue to live up to this title. One of the ways we have done so is through the introduction of our popular Networking Shuffle, networking format which has received rave reviews and been imitated by other local groups. As they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. We continue to educate our members on new legislation or new business practices. We have a variety of vehicles to achieve this, including our morning, lunch, evening, networking functions, lunch and learns, breakfast seminars, special luncheons and dinners, of course, and of course our signature events, like our golf tournament to take place on May 23rd. We continue to take leadership in the promotion of sustainable business practices. We launched Level 3 of our award-winning Eco-Business program last year, and our Eco-Business Advisory Committee continues to look forward supporting green initiatives, better waste management provisions for business taxpayers, and alternative energy. One means by which we have raised awareness of these issues is through our new Eco-Chat series. Launched earlier this year, the series provides an informal setting to discuss all things ecological. In keeping with our ongoing commitment to be business leaders with social conscience, our members and guests donate substantial funds for designated charities and not-for-profit organizations at various signature events. The Ajax Pickering Board of Trade is responsible to its membership to monitor, review, and advocate on issues that affect business at the municipal, regional, provincial, and federal level. As such, we are keeping an eye on many issues and regularly consult with our membership through surveys and an open dialogue. Some of the issues we have been following this year are transportation. We have been very engaged in a variety of transportation-related topics and have struck a transportation task force under the watchful eye of Tracy Patterson of Rouge Valley Health System Foundation and former Ajax Pickering Board of Trade President. I would also like to thank Gary Strange of First Term Insurance and Financial Limited, our current chair and last year's president, for all his hard work on this file. Of particular concern to this board is the Metrolink's big move. We have expressed our concerns that the proposed investments in Durham region won't adequately meet our transportation needs. We have also surveyed our members regarding their views on the proposed revenue tools to fund this $50 billion project and are just summarizing the findings and will be releasing them at our upcoming Transportation Summit being held on May 10th. We have also shared our views on Canada's new anti-spam legislation. In our view, it is excessively burdensome to legitimate businesses while not achieving its purported ends, since so much of the illicit spam clogging our bandwidth comes from abroad and is beyond the jurisdictional reach of this legislation. We also spoke up earlier this year when EI premiums were increased. Our economy is in a fragile recovery, and Ontario's employers are already facing increased operating costs due to higher WSIB premiums and the upfront investments needed to comply with Ontario's laudable but costly new accessibility requirements. We were pleased that prior to the release of the most recent federal budget, we sat down with Minister Tony Clement to discuss our issues. Not only were we pleased to be consulted, but it seems the federal government listened. For some time, we have been calling for funding to assist employers with skills training for their existing workforce as a way to encourage employers to retain and retrain. We're pleased to see that the new Canada Jobs Grant will help to meet this need. Emergency preparedness and business continuity are of great concern, and we have a need and indeed obligation to further educate our membership in cooperation with the city and the region. Our businesses need to plan and be prepared for the worst and need to know the process and protocol that is in place to deal with what if, who to call, what to do, how to notify employees, where to get the information. Our chamber colleagues in Goderich found out in 2011 how 13 seconds can change everything when they were hit by a tornado that wiped out the business district, and we need to be prepared in every way possible before something like that happens here. For this reason, our latest edition of Bulletin by Mail dealt with this very issue, and will be hosting an emergency preparedness breakfast seminar on May 16th. With guest speakers from the Goderich Chamber of Commerce, the Durham Region Emergency Management Office, Ontario Power Generation, and Walker Head barristers and solicitors. Crime was also noted as a serious concern to our members in our most recent government relations survey. Fraud is a crime that affects individuals, businesses, and the economy as a whole. Criminals separate Canadians from millions of dollars of their hard-earned money every year through countless illegal techniques, with fraud in the workplace alone costing small businesses $3.2 billion. We actually had seminar on this as well, and we heard from the Durham Regional Police, and they said that 3.2 billion is actually really 3 times that amount, only because a lot of people don't report fraud. And the good news is he said that we seem to have a pit bull inspector in the Durham region, and in 2010, the Durham region losses actually went down by 46%, and apparently he's well known in all of the whole area. So if guys, they don't want to do fraud in Durham region, it was actually good to hear. For this reason, we hosted that event on April 10th called The Many Faces of Fraud. Topics covered included identity theft, internal security and online transactions, debit credit card fraud, check fraud mitigation. These are some of the issues that the volunteers and staff of the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade are reviewing, monitoring, and advocating. Our board endorses and applauds the City of Pickering for the many proactive programs that you have created and for the work that you continue to do with the diverse businesses within this great community that has helped them to succeed. We commend your work to provide an attractive, safe, clean, sustainable, and business-friendly community. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak to you, and let me assure you that our council and membership will continue to support and partner with the city on issues of common interest. By continuing to work together, we'll have a stronger community that we're all proud to call home. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Councillor Dickerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Bill, my congratulations and thanks on behalf of all of us for the work that the Ajax-Pickering Board of Trade does for businesses here in Pickering as well. When you were talking, one of your points was Metrolinks. As you know, the minister originally announced 11 tools, 11 different ways to think about using to raise the funds.
Yes.
And I know that point of comment is still out. Have you sent your comments in yet to the minister?
Well, what we've done is, like I mentioned earlier, we surveyed our members, and we're just gathering all the information. And we're actually having an event on May 10th that I spoke of. And at this event, we've already had another event as well. We're going to be gathering all the information, then we're going to come up with a position. So we haven't created a position yet.
There's 2 questions, I guess, that I have that come off the top of my head. One is to ask you, certainly I have a personal dismay, that the minister has announced what she wants to see included in the funding and won't exclude. And the second question would be to ask you, at this point, maybe the top 2 or 3 items that you would not want to see included in those 11 as tools to raise funds from the perspective of the business community.
Well, like I was saying earlier, we're just gathering the information today, but like the regional chair said, for sure property tax is off that list. I can tell you that for sure. But again, we don't have the final position until we gather all the information together, and then we will be releasing it. So on May 10th, when we have this session, we're going to be releasing the position from everybody.
Any preconceived idea then in your mind when a minister says that property taxes are not off the table and she's not really overly concerned what the municipalities think of that?
Well, you know what, I can tell you right now, that is not on the table for sure. That's one that will be rejected. And, you know, obviously, I'm not sure, because I don't have the information in front of me yet of what our memberships come up with, but if that's one of the issues, we'll definitely fight for it.
I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the delegation. Greatly appreciate all the wealth of activities you and your predecessors have done. It's amazing. A couple quick questions. You spoke about many of the things that you do, but just the basics. I see the Board of Trade everywhere, a lot of business openings. Wherever I go, there's representatives, 1, 2, or more. How many members do you have now, and has there been a substantial growth? If you could speak to that, please.
Well, right now, I mean, there's always, it depends on what time of point you're looking at, because there's always a lot of renewals in the way, but you know, I mean, it's a number that changes constantly, because obviously some people don't renew, and then you're always getting new members. But you know, if you can't quote me exactly today, but we're looking at, it's definitely over 500 members, and we have grown. There's no doubt about that. But there's always, as you know, with small businesses, some of them don't renew. But then we've got, I would say, around 35 new members so far this year. I can't tell you that. and they're all various sizes too. And the way I look at it is sometimes we get some bigger companies that have joined us, and actually one of them was Nelson Industries just joined us. So a company like that would, if you have a bunch of 1 or 2 size companies, you get a few of those, it's great for the growth. They see the value in us, so that's why they join.
That's great, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for all your activities and so forth. And actually, I've already registered for your Transportation Summit on May 10th, so I'm registered. I'm looking forward to attending, because transportation is one of the key elements, I imagine, of business. If you can't move, can't come, can't go.
Totally agree. That's why we found that's why we spend actually an enormous amount of time on this. And you do have to remember, we are volunteers. We do our best, and that was the top topic for sure. Gary, like I said, Gary's done a lot of work on this, and Tracy Patterson. So that's why I want to commend them both. We have a task force, and that's why we're bringing this to our community's attention. It's huge.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Bill, thank you so much.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
It's already been said, but let me echo it on behalf of council. You're doing a great job in the community. The growth numbers are impressive, and the fact that you're out at so many of our community events, we thank you. And thank you for acknowledging our staff and the work they do with the Board of Trade. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Our final delegation this evening is Marion Thomas and Julie Chambry on the Seton Community Phase 3.
Good evening, Mayor Ryan and councillors. Happy to be here tonight on this Earth Day. Just thought I would point that out. At this time, I'm here to ask you to carefully consider our letter of April the 18th and support our request that the development of Seton respects and adheres to the original principles of the North Pickering Land Exchange and Development and the Central Pickering Development Plan. We have also requested in that letter that we be included as a stakeholder in all aspects of plans for the North Pickering lands. This includes, but is not limited to, the following: financing of infrastructure, including discussions at a municipal and regional level relating to development charges, tax increases, and memorandums of understanding with the Seton landowners. Infrastructure plans, including planning of bridges and roads and management of traffic within as well as in and out of North Pickering, including but not limited to the Hamlet of Whitevale traffic impact and management study. Plans and discussions relating to all proposed uses within the Hamlet Heritage Open Space, including densities adjacent to the Hamlet Heritage Open Space and the Whitevale Heritage Conservation District. And finally dialogue with the province related to the return of the heritage lot properties within Seton and the Whitevale Heritage Conservation District to the original owners or current occupants, as was done for the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve. We also requested that the issues raised by our delegations to the Executive Committee last Monday relating to the development charges and the corresponding financing of Seton infrastructure, as well as the transportation shortfalls relating to bridges, roads, and transit, be included as part of your OMB issue list. Since I was here last week, I've had a little more time to review the Watson report on the fiscal impact of the Seton community. Watson Associates has acted as the city's, and the region's, I might add, peer review consultant. It was my understanding that the landowners were to have completed a fiscal impact study that satisfies the City of Pickering and the region of Durham. I have yet to see these documents. I was going to ask you to do a peer review of the IBI documents and now realize that this is the City of Pickering's attempt to do just that. Since the IBI report is referred to in the Watson report in the background information and actually to specific page numbers that I cannot reference, I am asking for you to provide me with this document. While the Watson report supports your contention that there is no financial impact to the City of Pickering, it does not provide similar assurance to the taxpayers of Pickering. We were promised no additional property taxes for Seton, and I'm not reassured by this document that this is the case. I'm asking you to join with us and make certain that the required infrastructure will be provided and that we are absolutely clear on who is going to pay for it. Now, let's look at transportation, where your Chief Administrative Officer does not appear to share your concerns regarding traffic. I'm absolutely certain that your constituents do. The review of the Phase 1 external road network completed in March of 2012 by the BA Group states on page 18, there is clearly a need for additional AM and peak period roadway capacity across the Metro York-Durham boundary. The existing capacity deficiency will continue to increase over time and will not be satisfied by the widening of Highway 401 to 12 lanes. Number 2, construction of Highway 407 to 6 lanes in addition to the Highway 401 improvement will not address capacity requirements at the 2011 planning horizon. Number 3, it was assumed that a percentage of trips made by transit crossing the East Metropolitan Toronto boundary in the peak hour would increase from 19%, that was in 1989, to 30%. Even with this optimistic increase in transit, it is forecast that there will be significant shortfall in transportation capacity across the Metro York-Durham boundary. The upgrading of Steeles Avenue from 2 lanes to 4 lanes is needed as one component of a package of transit, roadway, and operational improvements, which will be required to satisfy travel demand across the Metro York-Durham boundary. Steeles Avenue is a logical first priority in the package of improvements because compared to others, its cost is lower, environmental impacts are fewer, and it maximizes the transportation service provided by recently opened Taunton Road connection. At the time this report was written, Phase 1 of Seton contemplated a population of only 19,600 people. Phase 1 has now been increased to almost 37,000 people, and this report is currently being updated to reflect the increase in population. After reading all of this, it's difficult for me to understand the conclusion on page 14 of the Stage Servicing and Implementation Study where it states, the assessment undertaken in support of the SSIS has clearly demonstrated that the extensive additional arterial road capacity and new network connectivity to be implemented in the Durham region coincident with the development of Phase 1 of Seton will provide adequate vehicular capacity and connectivity for Phase 1 Seton without the necessity to widen Steeles Avenue west of the York-Durham town line. That's a really long sentence. That's what it says. Actually, the assessment to support this conclusion is still being prepared, and since the previous version does not support this conclusion with an increase of only 19,600 people, it would be hopeful to expect support for this conclusion with an increased population of almost 37,000. Mayor Ryan, you mentioned Steeles Avenue at last week's meeting, so I'm certain that you agree with me that this is not a credible conclusion. I was hopeful that in the absence of a fully integrated plan for moving the portion of commuters from Seton to other regions that Metrolinx would have some solutions to this problem. What I discovered is that beyond improved GO Transit and increased parking, there appears to be nothing on the horizon until 16 to 25 years of the Metrolinx plan, when they propose connecting Durham, Toronto, and York with rapid transit on Steeles Avenue. Taunton Road, Steeles Avenue is an arterial road right into the heart of Seton and is not being considered for rapid transit until 16 to 25 years from now. Yikes. While we wait, I anticipate that we'll be paying through some sort of increased taxes or tolls for improvements elsewhere. I don't know about the list of 11 things in the toolbox, but anyways, as I look at you today, I realize that many of you will not be here when this mess hits the fan. You will have retired or moved on to perhaps a job with far less stress. I'm absolutely certain that you do not wish to leave your constituents with either financial or traffic burdens. I am certain you do not want this to be your legacy. While you are not responsible for the circumstances that created these problems, you are in a position to advocate on behalf of your constituents to make a bad deal better. I am asking you now to update your OMB issues list to include the financial and traffic concerns of your constituents, in addition to our request to remain involved with all aspects of planning of the plans for North Pickering. Finally, I am asking you to slow down. The reports that experts need are only starting to appear. I have received all of these reports except for one of them since March 19th of this year. I still do not have the IBI fiscal impact studies prepared for the region and the city, and the updated review of Phase 1 external road network is still outstanding. I have said it before and I will say it again. This is a huge project that deserves the time to make certain that you get it right. Right now, I feel that I have jumped in at the tail end of a project, yet I've been involved since the beginning. The TRCA has already said that they cannot comment on documents they have not yet received, and I have asked you to postpone the hearings until they can give this project the time and dedication to good development that it deserves. I am so afraid that we're going to miss something that has profound implications for the city of Pickering and its residents. I would like to suggest that we wait until all the documents have been provided and allow some time for us to absorb them, then at that time reschedule the hearings. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear the end. That was the end?
That was the end.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Questions to the delegation? Being none? Well, then put your hand up. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you. I was making many notes here. Thank you very much for your delegation. Frankly, it was a little bit hard to hear you because your microphone was a little bit over to the
Oh,
side.
sorry, okay.
If you straighten it up, that'd be great.
I have a cold too. Roger and I must have been in the same place.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of questions for clarification through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for all your great work. You talked about being at the table. That was at the top of page 2 of 3 of your submission that you gave through the clerk's office, and we all have a copy of it. Can you elaborate more about being at the table?
I'm going to answer for Marion, so give her a break. She's really not feeling very well this evening. As you know, Peter, we worked together on a number of these issues. At the table, I think that over the last 40 years, the residents of Whitevale have been very clear about their commitment to be at the table as stakeholders and offer their expertise in helping the city, the region, and the province in the planning of Seton.
And I believe there was the previous ag preserve arrangement with the province, the region, the city, and the Whitevale District Residents Association. And for that, west of the West Duffins Creek, was the Whitevale residents a stakeholder in that? Because I know they're one of the signatories. What can you tell me about that?
Marion probably knows. Marion was, yes. But can you tell him any more about that? So you know it better than I do.
Thank you.
Yes, we were very involved in saving the agricultural preserve, and I consider that a great accomplishment.
It was a great victory, and it's still an ag preserve right now.
It still is.
And how did you achieve that status to work with the province, with the city, with the region? How did the 4 groups come together in that collaborative?
Well, some were more cooperative than others. First of all, I think that the province of Ontario doesn't have an agricultural preserve and realized it was important to save some agricultural land. And this was the best agricultural land in the Seton area, in the area that was expropriated, 40 years ago? Okay. It was, I believe the city of Pickering did what they called a rural study just before it was sold as or made an agricultural preserve to determine that it was actually the best agricultural land in that area.
And if I can combine those 2 questions, maybe you can both answer, whomever may know the best, or whoever may know the best. Being at the table and stakeholder participatory involvement, how do you see that at the table? Because obviously there's gazillion meetings. We have staff all over the place. There's Durham Region, which has a huge role to play in this, obviously. So how do you see that involvement as a stakeholder participant, quote unquote, at the table? Can you elaborate, or do you have vision of that exactly yet?
It's challenging to be able to answer a question like that, Peter, as I'm sure you can imagine, without knowing exactly what the plans are moving forward. We've been very thankful to Catherine Rose and her team for allowing us to meet with them about 3 or 4 times a year, and she gives us updates. But what we're talking about are the types of things that Whitevale's been involved in the past as stakeholders. They were involved as stakeholders in the development of the CPDP, where we were promised at that time a heritage open space that did not include anything. We didn't think we'd be hoodwinked on that one. And we were also promised the Whitevale bypass. But again, we obviously, not being planners, didn't realize we should have had a timeline put to that. So of course, those were the two things that Whitevale, we were involved with as stakeholders on that. We've been involved with stakeholders at the table with Seton for many years. I mean, Isabel Thompson has been involved in so many things over the years, although she's gone now. There's many opportunities, and I know that the city and the region and the province have provided forums for groups such as ours to be involved and to put forward our ideas and our thoughts to help move this forward in a positive way.
And would that be due to the reason that quite often by the time you give your opinion, things are somewhat down the road and you've almost missed your opportunity, or a little chance for your input to have any impact or effect?
Well, I think that's what Marion was trying to say, is when you receive stacks of documents like that and you have 24 hours to turn it around, when, I mean, some of us have jobs outside of this, most of us do, and other commitments other than sitting around the kitchen table reviewing things, trying to digest them. As somewhat novices in some ways, we don't have our degrees in planning, although some of us should have after the years that some have spent doing this.
I'll leave that line of questioning for now and continue through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of Phase 1 and Phase 2, that's not the original Phase 1 and Phase 2. Was there not 3 and 4?
And Marion knows this one better, but yes, you are correct.
Originally, when we had all the meetings, when all the public meetings were occurring, Phase 1 was Phase 1, and it was 19,600 people. And there were 4 phases originally, and now that has been combined into 2 phases. The first phase is now 37,000 people, and the second phase is, I can't remember the exact number, I've got it here somewhere, and then a subsequent phase that will just be infill development, which is a small portion of what was originally planned.
So it obviously must be somewhat confusing when they tell you Phase 1, and now they tell you it's Phase 1, but it's a double the size project.
Actually, what the problem is that all the meetings that we had, all the information that was handed out to people was based on a Phase 1 of 19,600 people. When you look at the stage servicing, they still have not produced a background report that supports the transportation conclusions that they've come up with in the new stage servicing and implementation strategy. There's a lot of work to be done. They're working on it now. If they couldn't endorse the if they couldn't support not widening Steeles Avenue for 19,600, it's really difficult to believe that they can support it for 37,000.
And that's the very question I was coming to. In fact, were they not going to have that bypass bridge built for the original Phase 1 with only 19,000? Now they've doubled it up, and now they're canceling or not?
No, they were still postponing the bypass bridge until after Phase 1. But now Phase 1, I don't know how long Phase 1 will last, because it depends on how many houses they build per year. Okay? If it's 1,900 like the developers predict, it'll be 5-6 years to get to phase 2. But if it's only 1,500 as the budget predicts, it'll be much longer. So I can't predict how long. There's no timelines associated with the bridge. And what I found very fascinating was when I actually started looking at the background studies, you can see that York Region has plans to widen Steeles Avenue between Tapscott and 9th Line. And the 9th Line, they plan on widening to 6 lanes, and it would hook up to Donald Cousins Parkway, which actually meets 14th Avenue. They call this the Donald Cousin Morningside Link. And this would actually, if there was a way for people in Pickering to get to it, this would provide an alternate route to the 401. Not everybody can afford the 407.
That's right, but as you say, this bridge may not go in till the year 2031 or beyond.
I don't think I can live long enough to see this bridge unless it's endorsed by this council at the OMB that it's really required.
And it's hard to know what's going on if you don't have a full set of information and documents.
We still don't have all the documents yet.
Have you seen the regional fiscal impact study yet?
I have the background study for the development charges and the proposed bylaw for the development charges. I don't have the fiscal impact study that was produced by the landowners.
I don't have it either.
The IBI group,
Yeah,
or
pretty
whatever
hard.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And neither of us have
For
it.
some reason or other, nobody wants me to see these things. I've been trying for 2 years to get them.
We've been waiting a while. And one more question through you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't quite hear what you were saying at the end there, the last part of what your delegation was about the TRCA.
The TRCA.
Could you
yes.
please repeat that and clarify?
The TRCA has been waiting for stormwater management plans, and I'm not totally familiar with what the TRCA does, but they look at water balance and they make sure that everything works in conjunction so that that we don't have flooding. That's the purpose of this. And they have not received the master servicing plan or the NFSSRs. I can't remember what that stands for now, but they're still waiting for that, and they are reluctant to commit to the hearings until they actually get those plans and are able to have time to analyze them.
And are these the hearings scheduled for May 27th?
The hearing for May 27th is going to include traffic and financial impacts. The hearing for the TRCA is later, and I can't remember the exact date that it starts. But we don't know if the TRCA is going to be ready. They're concerned because they feel it's being rushed.
And
This is a huge project. It really needs careful consideration. I know that you haven't had time to read and digest all these books and these. I personally, I really haven't had time to look through the regions and analyze it to the full extent that it's really needed.
And since you were here last week, you heard about the city's wish list, and our staff will go forth and try to achieve a lot for us, and they'll be coming back to council with a report that we can accept or not accept as we proceed forward, if it's not to our satisfaction.
Well, it's my understanding that the CPDP was supposed to be the Bible, and I really just didn't think that you could pick and choose the bits and pieces that you wanted to put in and the ones you wanted to leave out, and we'll do this later. But, I mean, it was intended to work as a comprehensive plan that would actually work, okay? Or it had the potential to work. I think without the infrastructure that's really needed to support it, it's going to be a massive failure. Difficult to track business here unless you've got a warehouse on the 407.
Oh, I thank you very much. I appreciate the submission of the letter that we all have as well, and it's pretty amazing, and I hope staff will go forth with your concerns. And I thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming and all the people who put things together as well, you, Ms. Shembry.
Thank you. Councillor Pickles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, both of you for your presentation once again. Just quickly on two things. It does concern me a little bit that you've indicated that you believe there's reports out there that ought to be available but have not been made available to you. Could you, doesn't have to be now, it can be after the meeting, give me a list of what those reports are, and I'll be very happy to work with our staff to make those available, and what reports you understand are under preparation and you would like to see when completed. So
Okay.
I'll be happy to work with city staff and regional staff to try and get you that information.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Secondly, and you're, through you, Mr. Chairman, you're aware that this council has taken the position under Resolution 9411, which Councillor Dickerson and I brought forward in 2011, that we want to see that bypass included in Phase 1. You're aware of that? And
I am
continue
aware
to
of that.
support that?
Councillor,
Yes.
I should have chose different words.
wait, don't do the are we aware and yes they
I
are.
am aware of that, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Anything else?
It is in this report, and that would form part of the position of our staff when they're at the A1B hearing.
Well, it's nice to know that you're supporting us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That concludes the delegations.
Give you a motion to endorse on the letter of correspondence.
Second it?
Motion to endorse from Councillor Dickerson and Councillor
Speak to it.
O'Connell. This is on the correspondence dealing with the Fair Hospital parking charges. Discussion.
Ms. Luber.
Okay, I've got a whole list. Councillor Dickerson.
Thank you. This letter is intended to really go back to the province, particularly the Ministry of Health, to talk about the parking charges at hospitals. And one doesn't have to be a mental giant to know that the hospitals have been short of funds for a good many years, and no one would like to see that taken away. In fact, this letter is not asking for all fees to be dropped. It's saying that the fees be capped at a reasonable level. The problem of parking at both the Centenary and our own Ajax Pickering Hospital, and even more so if anyone is in a hospital in Toronto, whether downtown or Western or wherever, because the parking fees there are even more. But they simply cannot afford to get in to see their family members or their friends. And that was the question that I had of David when he was here. Is there any statistical evidence that suggests that those receiving regular visits, in fact, have shorter times in the hospital? And as he said, the answer is yes, and quite frankly, that is something that is becoming more broadly known. So my point is, in endorsing this, is not only to try to put a cap on these parking fees and bring them down to a reasonable level. There's no one that I have spoken to that has said, gee, you know, if it was $5 or something, you know, we'd get the money. It's important for us to go to see somebody, but we can't afford to be going there if it's going to be $12 or $15 or $20. We certainly can't afford that every day. It's like a treat once a week to be able to go at that point. Ajax isn't too bad because you've got the community center right close. You could park there free of charge, and you can proceed to walk over. That same opportunity. Well, except that you're not allowed to, but I'm sure Ajax doesn't mind. Oh, they do? Shame on them. So but you certainly haven't got any opportunities at Centenary because they're policed, the moles are policed and much more closely. So that's why I would say the motion we want to endorse, it isn't to kill the funding altogether. It's simply to bring it down to a fair level and to cap that level. We recognize that hospitals need monies, but you know, no matter how much we raise, their appetite for dollars is insatiable. There has never been enough money printed that could satisfy the hospitals. Having said that, we do the best we can with it, and that's what this motion would be. And I would be asking for a recorded vote on this.
You, Councillor Ash.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the endorsement. In fact, I was the member of council who asked the clerk to put this on the agenda. I am a past foundation member of the hospital. I know every one of members of council support our hospital. The Mayor's Gala supports the hospital. The Mayor's Golf Tournament is the chief recipient of the monies raised is for the hospital. And I know each and every one member of council goes to a number of events that support our hospital. So this is not about not supporting our hospital. The reality is a $16 parking charge at Ajax Pickering impacts a patient's care. The CBC, and I think Councillor McLean mentioned it, talked to that the cost of people visiting the hospital, people are actually not visiting their spouse or a sick loved one. So people are actually leaving emergencies because they can't afford the $16. People are actually missing doctor's appointments because they can't afford the $16. I think, and I posed the question today to the person from Rouge Valley who spoke about an income to the hospital of $4.4 million. And I know our treasurer would like to get that kind of money in parking charges across our fair city. But the reality is it's a service and it should be cost recovery. And I don't have any problem with cost recovery. I don't think the hospital should be subsidizing people visiting, but they shouldn't be profiting from it either. So I support the endorsement motion, and hopefully the Minister of Health and will listen to this issue. And again, it's not about not supporting our hospital, because we all do that. It's about fairness for our residents, fairness for our patients, and a level of fairness across the province. And Councillor Dickerson's quite right. I had to visit Toronto as a patient, and it was even more expensive than $16 to be visited down in the Toronto hospitals.
You, Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is actually an interesting one because not everybody can not afford the parking. And since that parking money actually goes to people's health, now sure they might divert into asphalt for the parking lot, but it's left pocket, right pocket, but it's money that goes to our hospital system, and hospital needs every kind of service, whether it's janitorial or heart surgery, instruments, etc. I will support this, but I'm very, very reluctant in one sense because it says at a fair rate. Well, what's fair? I mean, we do need some more specificity to know that we're dealing with, do we got $5, is that it? What about somebody who hasn't got the money and they've got to go every day or twice a day, day after day for a couple months on end? That adds up even. Meanwhile, you've got other people they can afford to pay. They've got cars, they've got gas, they can get there. And it's just, we're losing an opportunity to get some revenue. Maybe user pays. Maybe the park can just be free for everybody. You know, we just pay for it a different way. So it's a tough question. I am in support of it, but I'd rather there was more of a report with some more detail in here so we know what we're actually talking about. And that's all. Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Worship, and I don't disagree with the comments of Councillor Ash and Dickerson. As mentioned before about the fundraiser, I was at the Jack the Jennifer Ashley Foundation, and talking to the director there, I was amazed at how much money they raise has to go to families that can't afford to take their kids to the hospital for treatment, or that might be in the hospital for a long time, and they can't afford these hospital rates. So the foundations like this is getting money to support them, which I admire that. But that money could also go to other more important needs for these families, such as paying the hydro and paying the water, because quite often when you have a loved one or somebody, a child who's sick, one of the wage earners has to give up that job to stick with their family member. And then the hardships start adding up. Hardships of catching up in the bills, gas, and the parking. And, you know, somebody mentioned that they shouldn't be subsidized. Well, I think there should be some wiggle room with the hospitals for these groups that are obviously in need of help and obviously in need of support to be at the hospital, whether it's for x-rays or MRIs or taking their kids or their family members in on a daily basis, or just to visit them. So, you know, it is problematic, and I would certainly like to see this addressed by the health minister and other hospitals with policies in place to assist people like that, and have these foundation dollars go to, you know, other uses other than parking. So thank you, Your Worship, for letting me rant about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Recorded vote requested by Councillor Dickerson.
On the recorded vote, Councillor Dickerson,
Yes.
Councillor McLean,
Yes?
Councillor O'Connell,
Yes.
Councillor Pickles,
Yes.
Councillor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councillor Ash,
Yes.
Mayor Ryan,
Yes.
carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Move to planning report.
I'm going to take the reports one at a time. Report PD 2013-04, Planning and Development Committee, moved by Councillor Pickles, seconded by Councillor McLean. Any to be pulled? Being none, all in favor? That's carried. On the Executive Committee, 2013-04.
Move the executive.
Moved by Councillor Dickerson, seconded by Councillor McLean. Any to
Pull
be
one.
pulled? One to be pulled. On the balance, all in favor? That's carried. Item 1, Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you. This is the Seton report. Just through the mayor to staff, whomever can answer. I'm not going to try and summarize the delegation's entire point, but I think the three that stuck out for me were the concerns over the financial, the traffic, i.e. the bypass, and the Whitevale Residents Association as a stakeholder. So the financial, I feel fairly comfortable, even though what's given in this report in terms of the capital dollars right now doesn't look good. I feel very comfortable that staff heard loud and clear about our position that we're not going to accept this, that we need to fight hard at the board. So I feel fairly comfortable with that point. In terms of the traffic and the bypass and the position that staff are going to take at the board, I read in the report that there's going to be traffic impact and management study prepared to assess potential impacts on the hamlet of Whitevale by phase 3 hearing, or it's anticipated prior to. I guess what I want to know is, am I comfortable with that assessment, and how comfortable am I in terms of, or can staff help me better understand the position you're going to take at the board in regards to the traffic and the bypass and the need for it early? Because I can read about the assessment, but as far as I am concerned, it hasn't been done to date. So how hard is staff going to push at the board on this?
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. To focus specifically on the bridge, but in the context of the traffic impact, if you will, on the surrounding roads and Whiteville in particular, there's two times at which we, first of all, I'll step back. We may not say it the same way, but we share the issue.
Okay.
So it's in our report. It's covered under a number of different sections. We have both in our issues list a number of places where traffic is addressed, as well as in our conditions of subdivision approval. So they're in the report. I can point out specific sections if you would like. But I think what we did in the report in particular, and if I'll just sort of refer you to, I guess it's page 13 of the executive committee, both of the agenda number and the page number of the CAO report. At the top of that page picks up the point about the EA to date with respect to the bridge. And this is conclusions being reached by people who will be at the board to provide expert opinion that it's not required in the short term. So notwithstanding council's position, we've tabled what we have today as information out of the EA, and we can all kind of read that and understand that the expert opinion is not necessarily on the side of having a bridge as part of phase 1. With that in mind, we still have conditions attached to the issues list with respect to transportation, transportation impact, traffic calming around Whitevale, a series of issues. And it may not be any consolation to the residents to hear that the Phase 1 discussion may not go in the favor of putting the bridge in Phase 1 through the board process, notwithstanding what we may do in terms of presenting that position and others because of the expert opinion. We also have, in the way this is constructed, a second point at which this will be reviewed, and that is at the end of Phase 1, Phase 2, Seton Phase 2 cannot proceed without another traffic study. And what is also coupled with that is a holding provision that will be in place for all lands in Phase 2.
Thank you. And on that, what's the projected timeline for Phase 2?
This traffic study would be required for opening up Phase 2. So it's at the front end of Phase 2, so that may be 5 or 6 years in, depending on the take-up of Phase 1. I'm not going to give you an exact date because that's dependent on the marketing and the success for which Phase 1 is taken. But we're expecting a reasonably quick uptake of Phase 1. That means that traffic study would have to be started before the end of Phase 1 to get ready for a release of the Phase 2 land. So that's when it will be reviewed again. So there's a couple of checkpoints along the way. The first one is at the condition of approval. Well, through the board is the first one. Conditions of subdivision approval would be attached to that, any go forward on any of the subdivisions, and then at the Phase 2.
Okay, thank you. And just to make sure I heard you correctly, the experts are saying that the bypass is not required now, but staff are fully understanding of council's position, and that's the position you'll be taking at the board.
That's a matter of record, and the board would be made aware of that. That's correct.
So even doing something, adding something to it here tonight doesn't change anything because it's already the record position on file. Okay, thank you. And the last was the question of stakeholders. I'm not sure if we have this authority, but I'm curious, how do we ensure that moving forward that the Residents Association is a stakeholder or involved in the process? Will they have to, because it's at the board, do they have to seek that standing through the board?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Connell, the Whitevale Association, Residents Association, is a stakeholder. They're at the board.
Okay, so it's already, so we wouldn't be including them in everything moving forward anyways, as they're already. How do we ensure that it's not just their stakeholders at the board, but also in our consultation?
What I would like to suggest is if the Whitevale Residents Association would like to become more involved, they could call my office and I can arrange meetings with them to discuss some of the technical issues. In terms of their request to be at the table when we negotiate with developers or with the region or when we go through our development charge process, I think that would be very difficult. I have a tough enough time managing these staff.
I can understand.
We could put that offer out that I'd be prepared to arrange to have regular meetings with the appropriate staff and people from Whitevale to keep them in the loop, so to speak, as we move forward.
Thank you. I think it's fair enough to develop some type of process. I can fully relate to the fact that you can't necessarily have everybody interested at every meeting, but certainly at certain critical points so that it's not just a matter of when the report or when there's an agenda item, they're notified by the clerk as an interested party, but perhaps, some midpoint communication to say, this is when we're expecting a study to be completed, and then that follow-up, if it is completed or if it isn't. I can certainly appreciate that the region has been telling us any day now we should expect a fiscal impact study, and we still haven't received it. So I'm not saying that it exists and we just can't have it. I think that the final draft or the final version is just not ready for release. And I can't necessarily control that process at the region, but I think here it would be really helpful if we could create something, some midpoint dialogue to keep the residents in the loop. I'm assuming we don't need a formal resolution. The CAO has offered to speak with the residents and come up with something, and I appreciate that. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dickerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, either to you or through you to our solicitor. We were asked here this evening about postponing the Ontario Municipal Board hearings. What would be the likelihood of a request like that succeeding?
We both know the answer, but I'll defer to Mr. Biscioni.
Well, there would be a very dim prospect of that succeeding, given that the procedural orders made to date have already laid out a schedule for the conduct of the hearings.
Okay, so and I'm sure you heard the question. Would that be the answer you would have provided at the time that the question was asked?
Certainly, yes.
All right, thank you. If I can, to address your attention to page 59 of our report. And I'm not going to go through all the questions that I did a week ago, but there's a couple on here. I've got page 15 in my lower right-hand corner, page 59 in the left corner, just to follow it along. And that would be in our drafts in section 2.14. Okay, let me start with number D and the second paragraph. In fact, really the last line. Limited storage relating to a home-based business is permitted to the extent that it does not prevent the parking of the number of vehicles the private garage or accessory building or structure was designed to accommodate. So it has to do, just for anyone who's not familiar with it, to do with home-based businesses, garages, and the use of them. This is saying, in effect, you can use your garage to store something in that is with your home-based business, but not to the extent that it impedes the parking of a vehicle. Should we not be looking at this, Mr. Mellimick, for all residential homes in Pickering, because it's the greatest source of parking problems we've got, is people using the garage for everything but a vehicle. And that really is the intended purpose of a garage, not for a storage shed. That's my first question.
It's a good question, but it doesn't actually, it flows from this, but it doesn't relate to this. Can we just kind of park that and let staff get back to us?
Yeah, okay, all right, not a problem, not a problem. Then that next section in F, we say that no outdoor storage or visible display relating to a home-based business is permitted. And I'm not sure if that has to do with signage. When you say no outdoor storage, I understand that. A visible display. A display, you know, that if you were a dentist, you know, what would a display be? A giant tooth? Perhaps. I'm trying to get at the signage. We already have in our bylaws about signage. This seems to be saying something different. I'm just trying to make sure we don't have something saying something one place and something else saying something different another place. And Seton ought to be the same as the rest of the city. Food for thought again.
I thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that observation. I think as we clear up some of the zoning provisions to the point where we can clarify that that does not include permitted signage, I think that will help clarify that particular issue, but thank you for pointing that out.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, the request was just made, Mr. Prevedal, to you to include the community association in further discussions. I might suggest that they're not the only community association that has an interest in how this city develops and in Seton. So I would ask you this question. Would there be room at the table, if you're going to have such meetings, to invite other community associations to those meetings for knowledge? And
Yes.
Thank you.
Just before we go to the next two point, number one, if you're going to do that, I suggest that you do it all at one time because you're going to eat up a ton of staff time. Number two, I'm kind of curious, following on Councillor Dickerson's line of questioning. We have a home-based business bylaw. Is it different in Seton? And if it's not different in Seton, why not just a simple line item that says Seton has to follow the home-based business bylaw?
Thank you. I was thinking exactly the same thing, whether this is much different, and if it's a clarity needed even in our existing bylaw, I think it's worthwhile to make, but it certainly should be consistent.
Mark Twain was paid by the word. We aren't. Councillor, who's next? Councillor Pickles.
Thank you. I'm still chuckling over that comment, and the concern that I better get my garage cleaned up before Councillor Dickerson comes around. I just wanted to, I went through a lot of stuff last week and we made a lot of questions to the delegation, so I just want to make a few quick points. The first thing is, I think we should recognize, I mean, infrastructure seems to keep coming up as a negative item, and it's not a negative item. And I stated some of this last week, but in here we're looking at 2 new recreation centers, 2 new libraries, 4 ice rinks, 2 new swimming pools, 2 new fire stations, and a whole bunch of other amenities. I would suggest that infrastructure in most cases is good. In fact, tonight we've talked about improving Steele's Taunton connection. We've talked about the Whitevale bypass and a bridge. More infrastructure that is good, and if we could, as we've suggested, we would proceed with it even earlier. The downside of that is all that infrastructure is expensive, and I'm very pleased, and I think we need to emphasize that the report in front of us tonight shows that the financial concerns are a priority. And again, in recommendation number 3 of the report, we say that we want to ensure that the development of Seton does not create a financial burden on the city. And that's repeated again in our, as the very first issue in the list of issues for the upcoming Phase 3 OMB hearing on page 19. And again, as the very first item in the recommended conditions of approval for Seton Development Draft Plan of Subdivision Applications. Number 1 priority in all 3 of those is to ensure that there isn't a financial burden on the city and that there isn't a financial burden on the existing taxpayers or even the new taxpayers in the city. And the direction that staff is looking from us this evening is to have further discussions with those who are doing the development, to have them provide further funds to do the upfront funding of that work so that it isn't a burden on the city and the taxpayers. And I think that's very important to emphasize, and I think that's very good recommendations, a very good position to take forward. And as I said last week, Godspeed to you in seeing that through. The other things were more specific to what the Whitevale residents have pointed out, and I'm very pleased in the report, Tony and Tom, that the previous resolution 9411 is on here. It's a stated council specific recommendation that that bridge be undertaken in phase 1 for the Whitevale Road bypass. I'm very pleased to see it in the report and that it's goes forward as our formal position. And with respect to my earlier commitment to the residents of Whitevale, if there's any reports out there that they're looking for, they haven't received, or any points coming forward that they'd like to, I'd be more than happy to work with staff to see that the residents get those reports. So that's my quick summary, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that, and through you to staff, I have a few questions and a number of comments. And of course, I did ask a tremendous number of questions last week to all the delegates about this issue because it's absolutely critical in so many ways. I'm pleased with the report that it tries to attempt to address those items. Achieving it's another thing. But just let me make sure I'm clear on this. The traffic impact study, is that not to be done until, let me make sure I heard it right, not to be done until somewhere in phase 1 towards phase 2? In other words, it won't be done at this point because the EA experts on, I think it was page 14 perhaps. Yes, at the, no, page 13, 13 on the bottom left, and 13 on the top. The findings of the EA to date are that the bridge is not required in the short term and may not be required until after 2031. And yet, we're not even going to do a study about the traffic? Or how does that work? It's just like ruled out, we're not going to have a bridge, there's no money for it? Please elaborate and explain. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rodriguez. I know you asked a lot of questions within the question, and I'll try to just kind of give you an answer that I think may cover what some of the points you made. Your concern about a traffic study not appearing till the end of phase one, I made that comment, but I want to maybe direct you to, now it's page 39 of the Executive Committee report, which starts to list some conditions of approval. I'll wait a minute until I'm sure that you're there. Under the heading traffic dash roads. Okay, so you will see number 60, 61, 62, all refer to types of traffic studies applicable now. And as we go through those studies, we will be dealing with the impact of traffic, not just on Whiteville, but in the Seton area. In the event, if a bridge is not built in phase one, which is appearing to be the conclusion of the EA and accepting of that potential, we also have condition number 66 at the bottom of the page, speaking about a future transportation study, and that's the one I referred to that's kicking in at the end of phase one because there's a holding zone provision that would only be removed with that second transportation review at the end of phase one. So there's a second opportunity to revisit what we will try to be revisiting, obviously, in phase one, but recognizing the potential of that discussion, we want to be able to revisit again, if it's unsuccessful getting a bridge in phase one, before phase two starts.
That's really great. I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I thought there was going to be a traffic study, and then I heard it's down the road. No pun intended. But just let me ask about the EA that says there is not one required in the short term. Is that one being done through Durham Region? Yes. And they have a particular consulting firm working on that?
Genevar is the consulting firm they have working on that, Councillor.
And is Genevar the same consulting company that says sideline 26 should go straight up the middle? Because that's all part of the EA, I guess?
That would be correct.
Is there any possibility Pickering could get its own, probably too late now and probably really, really expensive, maybe to tackle a couple of these issues? Perhaps just the sideline 26 alignment. Is that feasible or possible?
Your question is, and I think you alluded to the answer, it's feasible, it could be expensive, and it may not lead you to a different conclusion.
Three good, succinct, short answers that are clear. I think Councillor O'Connell raised many, many good points, absolutely. One of them, and it's about the Whitevale letter that we received, and I believe that they've said before, they're not just speaking for Whitevale. They're looking at other aspects of Pickering. I mean, the Ag Preserve is not for Whitevale per se, it's for Pickering. So in the same way, I understand the complexity. You can't have resident associations involved in kind of, let me call them internal meetings. But then there's the other extreme end of it where you tell them what's happened and, oh yeah, they're involved, but at such a distance, it's hardly pointful. So the devil is in the detail in this. Just, I think we need to find out, somewhere between maybe now and May 27th, when the hearings begin, just at what level, how, and maybe some discussions with the Residents Association, Whitevale and District Residents Association, as to what that relationship may be. And just because they happen to be parties to the OMB at great expense to the association, does not preclude them from beyond that date being involved in this, because it doesn't end in May, June, July. It's an ongoing process, and I do believe from what they've said, they want to be involved in that in a very long-term basis, because Seton is a 5, 10, 15, 20-year build-out. So if we could, as a direction to staff, if everyone is agreeable, I think if we could just hammer that out in a, I wouldn't say informal way, but with a direct communication way, just to make sure it's clear to us.
I think the CAO has already made that commitment, Councillor.
Well, I believe he said he'd tell them what was going on, Your Worship.
He said he was going to sit down with them and work it out.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Is that right, Mr. CAO?
Yep.
Fantastic. That's great. Great. Now, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the appropriate member of staff, are you aware, the wrong kind of question, but Heritage Advisory Committee, have they been involved in this process much so far? Have you gotten lots of advice from them, advisory details?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the Heritage Advisory Committee has been involved at a number of different points through the process. A number of years ago, when we had first started the neighborhood planning program, there were presentations by Carl Bray, our heritage consultant. More recently, Carl Bray attended one of the meetings of the Heritage Committee and explained some of the items that would be looked at through the plans of subdivision and how they related to a heritage home that would be on a lot not inside the draft plan. And he actually conducted a site visit with a number of the members of the Heritage Committee, and he took down their comments on the draft plans of subdivision and provided that actually to our staff liaison, Christina Celebre, and she's provided that to Ross Pym. And we've actually discussed those recommendations with our planning consultant.
Thank you. And just for clarification, I was on the Heritage Committee as a resident prior to this, and I don't remember meeting Dr. Bray until we had those 3 sessions in kind of this summer of 2010. And I was on the Heritage Committee. I didn't see that. And the next time I saw him was just a little while ago at the Phase 2 hearings. So that's quite a few years between. So yes, I am aware that the committee was involved, but certainly we're not suggesting that once every 2-3 years or so that gives the Heritage Committee sufficient time to advise council as to the heritage matters, are we? Are we? Through you, Mr. Chair? To the correct staff person? And it's not quite rhetorical. It's quite rooted in.
I think once the Heritage Committee has established the heritage attributes, they don't change much. They just get older.
No, there were all sorts of things. I remember people gathered in 2010 to discuss things like the alignment of the 26 sideline with Dr. Bray, and the conclusion was obvious to go around it. As a matter of fact, related to that, you have another document in front of you, or another correspondence dated April 21st, given to the clerk by Mr. Gordon Zimmerman, who is an architect, is a strong interest in historic buildings and so forth. He was on that committee back in 2010, and he documents it quite well in his letter, and I hope every member of council had a good chance to read this. It's quite detailed, and I hope staff will incorporate this into their planning, and it talks about all the same issues we've been talking about already. And it's just, I could quote it, but I don't want to take up your time. It's just, with the 26th Island, it will inevitably destroy the character of the houses there. And the house is at present within the Heritage Conservation District. And he quotes all kinds of details, a knowledgeable person. Last time he had some input was probably back in 2010. And that was not as a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee, it was just as a resident. And I know, being on the Heritage Committee myself right now as the counselor on the committee, we just got a rush at the last month or so. Boom, 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 boom. And thank goodness Dr. Bray was able to come out several days later. Thank goodness we were able to walk the road. Thank goodness we were able to cram a report through. Thank goodness our staff could try and squeeze all the comments together, but it's hardly enough time to give it sincere and deep appreciation of what's going on. And what we're looking at now is the subdivision plan. We didn't talk about the previous Phase 2 issues with the heritage open space. We didn't get a chance to comment on that. We didn't get a chance to comment on hardly anything. So so much for an advisory committee when we don't get the chance to give you any advice. And maybe the advice isn't, maybe it's incorporated somewhere else. Maybe it's just, but I find it terribly lacking. And I just want to make sure that with this wish list that we have here of issues, as it says on page, the first page of that, 2A, present the issues list and will defend the city's interests and so forth. When, and right now this city staff, perhaps Mr. Prevost, will be going forward to discuss with the landowners, the 4 main property developers, plus the province as another property developer. At what point will we come back with the report? Is that before the OMB hearing in May 27th? When do we, because there's some report coming back to council as to the status of where we are with this and whether or not it's in line what's been ratified with or some understanding between the land developers. If we can reduce this issues list of maybe 100, 150 items and we get it down to 80, 90, 30, whatever the number might be, resolvable issues.
Question is, we're going to get status reports in roughly what points in time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rodriguez. Between now and May 27th, it's unlikely that you'll get a status report from staff on the issues list. We've got, subject to council approval, we have direction to go to the OMB with the issues list, work out as many of the issues as we can before the OMB. What we will be coming back to council with is a draft memorandum of understanding to deal with the financial impacts prior to May 27th.
Good. Now, one thing that was mentioned earlier, I think Chair of Durham Region, Roger Anderson, mentioned about building permits. If we find things are not going well in Seton, if the province doesn't release the lands, if people don't move in there, can we just stop issuing building permits? Is that feasible? If things are not in alignment with what we want, is it not one of our strengths as a council to deny issuing those building permits? And there might be a number of bases for it, whether it's sustainable placemaking guidelines, or we find that traffic has become horrendous in all parts of Pickering. Through you, Your Worship.
Councillor Rodriguez, that is something that we could look at as part of the MOU process when we sit down with the developers and the province, because it's key that the province is one of the 5 big players, and they have committed to deliver employment lands. They've committed to finance infrastructure to deliver those employment lands. So we will certainly look at that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Prevost, but the question was, can the City of Pickering deny building permits based on traffic, et cetera, or the jobs not materializing? And I don't think your answer was direct. Mr. Bigioni?
Through the mayor, the city staff are extremely limited by the requirements of the Building Code Act in terms of when they can deny issuance of a permit. When the requirements of the Act are met, a permit must issue. So that's the general scheme we have to live with. The OMB process and the MOU discussion process are really, and this is why we've gone to council for direction. These are the primary tools with which we'll ensure that the city's interests are best attended to. But once there are approved plans of subdivision in the context of official plan policies, it's the Building Code Act of Ontario that says when a building permit may be issued or denied.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I really do. And through you, Your Worship, again, does that mean that when our Chair Roger Anderson said if the infrastructure doesn't go up to the employment lands, we can not issue building permits, or was he wrong? Not that you're his solicitor, but...
He was not precisely legally correct, but what he was alluding to is the fact that we can, through the implementation of holding and other zoning provisions, put ourselves in a position where that is legally possible. But to simply state the question in a vacuum, can we just deny a permit whenever we're unhappy? The answer to that question is no.
And one last question. As Councillor O'Connell was asking, I think it's pretty important, The direction we've been giving staff in various forms through our comments last week at the executive committee meeting and this week at council, will staff be taking those forward as council's direction? Since we didn't necessarily draw them up as issues and make motions on them and vote on them and so forth.
Have to hear you.
Yeah, I have to hear you.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we will be bringing those forward as direction from council as per the report.
That'll be great. That'll be great. And I look forward with yourself and whichever other party, perhaps some of our planning staff, meeting with the Whitefield and District Residents Associations and coming back and letting us know if that is working well to both parties' satisfaction. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll ask for a recorded vote on item 1.
On the recorded vote, Councillor Ash?
Yes.
Councillor Dickerson?
Yes.
Councillor McLean?
Yes.
Councillor O'Connell?
Yes.
Councillor Pickles?
Yes.
Councillor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
I'll move both,
Moved by Councillor O'Connell, seconded by Councillor Dickerson.
but I'd like to speak to 2, please.
So moved both, pulled 2. On 1, discussion, being none, all in favor? That's carried. Item 2, Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you.
This is the RFP for landscape and architectural consulting services at Don Beer.
Yes, thank you. If you turn to page 78 of the agenda, it's the conceptual plan, attachment 2 of the baseball diamond. 78, sorry, of our regular agenda. No,
No.
new and unfinished.
Tonight's agenda.
Through the mayor to Mr. Holborn, Mr. Prevedal, as somebody who spent pretty much my entire childhood in baseball diamonds across North America, not by choice, I strongly suggest that this be relined. The bleachers should be, I don't know if this is north or what, but we'll take the top of the page as north. The bleachers, oh, okay, sorry, so then it should be northeast. So the back part of the diamond should be in the northeast. And the reason for that is twofold. One, that is a very far distance to walk from the parking lot with bags, bats, helmets, and all the gear that you need. 2, it poses an issue if there's ever an accident on the baseball diamond to be able to get from the parking if you need an ambulance or something. And 3, you want from my experience, this is where my personal experience comes in very handy. You want the bleachers of where the people are watching to be as close to the children's play area as possible. Because for all the siblings who have to go and endure these baseball games, and they go and play in the park, and the parents will be able to see the park. So if you take this and you flip it 90 degrees, the angle should still work because you're essentially dealing with the same shape. But by putting the bleachers closer and the dugouts closer to the parking as well as the spectator area closer to the children's play area, it makes not a lot of sense to have it where it is, because you're going to have parents who can't see their kids playing, and you're going to have issues with people wanting storage down closer to the dugouts because it's a lot to carry. And then the third, like I said, from an emergency personnel can become very difficult. And we're not always dealing with players who get hurt at games. So to have that distance to walk is quite far. And I don't see from a space point of view why it can't just be flipped.
Just that?
Yeah, is there a reason why it can't be like that, or can this be re-looked at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Connell. When staff was first putting together this concept plan, the home plate was, as you are suggesting now, in the northwest corner as opposed to the southwest corner, which would put everything closer to the parking lot, closer to the playground, and closer to Highway 7 for those reasons. We then had discussions with Pickering Baseball Association, who are very much a user, or will be a user of this diamond, and we asked for their input. And their preference for baseball diamonds is to have it oriented the way it is, and that is with respect to lighting, and also with respect to the sunrise and the sunset and the time when they normally have their games. So it is a challenge to try to meet both criteria. However, this is a concept plan. When we engage our designer, we'll have further discussions about that.
Okay, thank you. I can fully appreciate the sunset levels and the lighting. I get it, why that's important to them. But then I would suggest relooking at it in its entirety, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have the play area so far from where the parents are going to be. And I can guarantee there's going to be people requesting either we bring the parking down or we do something to change it in the long run. I don't think it functionally works well. And I've been to a lot of baseball diamonds in my lifetime across North America. And it just, when I saw this, it doesn't functionally work. So if they have to angle it this way for the lighting, then I would suggest relooking at it altogether, because I don't think it's a good use of space then. So I'll leave that, and then I'm assuming this will come back for final concept design back to council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Connell, it would not normally come back except when it goes to tender, but in light of the comments you've raised, we'll certainly make sure it comes back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On the item, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Other business?
Hang on. I'll take the bylaws. Moved
Second
by
the bylaws.
Councillor Dickerson, seconded by Councillor Pickles. All in favor? That's carried. We have nothing confidential. Other business, Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. I have several points to raise here, several different points. We spoke about the no parking on the North Esplanade, just in from Glen Anna. We have some new no parking signs there. We had mentioned, and let me be more specific, I had mentioned it a couple times, because we were all in favor of it. We knew the buses, and we wanted the buses to come down that way. It's a pretty narrow, awkward turn. And they were going to put some notifications up, because people are used to parking that area, coming in kind of the back door to the planning department. And since it's not unexpected, you can do the same thing you've been doing for many, many years, weren't we going to put up some signs that said, new, pay attention, some no parking signs there? Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse, it's not life or death, but I think it'd be nice to the residents to let them have a little bit more visible notification. I mean, the signs are up there and it does have a little arrow saying about no parking, but if we make a request and it just doesn't materialize, fine enough. If that's the plan, we decided not to, I could live with that, but I thought we would do something. No one said we didn't want to, it was a bad idea for various reasons. Through you, Mr. Your Worship.
Is that it? You still have the floor.
Okay. Can I get a response back on that?
Does it require a response? Go ahead.
Of some sort.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Rodriguez. What staff have been doing for the first couple of weeks that the signs have been up is monitoring whether there actually has been parking in there. I actually saw someone parking right underneath the sign today on the north side. So the message isn't 100% getting through to the residents and the visitors and maybe some of the staff that are parking there. With respect to putting up signs, other than the no parking sign, which is really all that's required under the Highway Traffic Act and our bylaw, we are looking at putting up an informational sign, more so on the south side than the north side, indicating that there is additional parking on the at the parking lot on the Esplanade South. So we are looking at that, should this condition persist.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And it's only, I say, in a minor way, because, I mean, people are responsible for reading the signs. The signs are there, they're clearly marked. But it's just for this, you know, going one step beyond, just not the minimum of what the law requires, but to be reasonable to our residents who might inadvertently park there, or even a stranger. We don't want to have them having a bad feeling, oh, they come to City Hall where they've come before, and now they've got a ticket, you know. But I've been monitoring it as well, myself. And by and large, people have mostly been, but I've seen a few, and it's also for the bus turning as well. We want to help them out. So my next other point, through you, Your Worship, is the noise bylaw exemptions for the York sewer system. They've started this project a little while back, and we've had a number of issues of different kinds, and I've got one other one, but the very first one where we kind of automatically say, okay, you can exempt the noise bylaw, you can go 24 hours a day, and I understand it kind of gets them out of our hair, but I don't think we should be giving automatic approvals. It's not just a one-time thing, it's time and time. I don't know if it's the second, possibly the third time we've given them an exemption on our noise bylaw. So if someone could address that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rodrigues, we, of course, we can't go back on what we've already done, but we've committed in future, rather than exempt these requests at staff level, we will advise council in advance. If we have any feedback, we will use that feedback in dealing with whether it's York Region or anyone else.
Yes, and that's fine, and thank you through Your Worship. We have had notification that we've granted them permission, so we've been told what's happened, but I'd rather us well in advance, you know, so we get it.
Councillor, you didn't listen. The CAO said he will tell you, he will canvass us in advance.
Yeah, and Your Worship, I'm trying to say that we'll get this well in advance, not just 3 or 4 days, but a week or more would be good. Great, fantastic. Thank you, Your Worship. And related to that, about the York Durham sewer pipe, of course, we all know about the explosion and the tragedy that is. I believe one of the people may still be in the hospital. But even if you're not in the hospital, it's still a terrible tragedy, and I understand the entire system is closed down right now. And I'd just like to find out, that they have a 888 number, 888. Now, I know residents are supposed to call it, and I don't know how many people really know about that number. I don't know how many people really, in fact, do call it. Do we get any kind of feedback on that? How many complaints there have been? What kind of complaints there have been? You know, I mean, I had to hear from residents some of their complaints. I never heard from York Region or their contractor, Strawbag, and that's just one thing about the complaints. I don't get much of a report about it. They do have those CCAC meetings, the Southeast Collector Advisory Committees, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they meet about once every 6 months, once a year, and that's hardly timely information. So my question is, what can we do to get more information? What can we find out now about the number of complaints that have gone through, how they've been addressed, and that? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rodrigues. When the project was approved, one of the conditions from the Minister of Environment was that a complaint protocol be put together. And that has been done. That was one of the first documents that they prepared. And through that complaint protocol, the Region of York is required to log every single inquiry and concern, including property damage, that they receive. And they also have to prepare reports for the Minister of the Environment about how complaints and inquiries are disposed of. So that information is available. It is made available to the advisory committee members, of which I'm a member on behalf of the City of Pickering. So I do get that information. You are correct, we only meet about once every 6 months now. However, I am allowed to get information on an as-needed basis. Normally their reports are about a month or so behind. By the time a month ends, it takes them about a month or so to put a report together, but they do have monthly reports. So I can get some information if you request.
Because I know just prior to the explosion, I had 2 different neighbors, you know, a couple days before, telling me they had a really stink smell. Now, I know methane, which is what ignited, I know that has in of itself no odor, it's odorless. But it's being an organic compound, there's an associated other smells that may or may not be associated with it. Anyway, upon talking to that neighbor, even, I think it was after the explosion, well, they still hadn't called him back. Like, I directed him to the 888 number, said, please make sure you do it. He didn't quite realize that it was a number there, so forth. Maybe just call me directly. You know, I don't know who they'd call, but how do we know, and not to doubt them, but how do we know they're getting all the calls? How does Pickering independently, just like when you do anything, you have an auditor, you have, you know, someone who just double checks just for precision, just for accuracy. We can all make mistakes. But they didn't call him back for quite a while. How do we know that? Like, are they going to say, oh, we didn't call, or we called them right away? When I know for a fact, they didn't. Through you, Your Worship.
Through the chairman to Councillor Rodrigues, if you have a specific inquiry that you would like me to follow up on, I can certainly do that with the region of York in terms of how that complaint was logged and how it was followed up. That's really the only way we can do that.
Oh, exactly. That's my point. We're in the dark. How do we know what we don't know? Because we don't know it. You know, and how do we find out? How do we know what to even ask about? So that's why I was asking just prior, should we not be able to get some kind of monthly updates? How many complaints were there? Maybe there were none. Maybe there were 20. Just to get some feel of it. Are people happy, unhappy? We know last summer up on Bloomfield Court, there were tremendous problems. There were odors then too. One woman called her daughter and said, get out of the house. The gas company came, you know. I don't know what it was. And I know when they were drilling, there was methane. There's methane all over up there, the Collingwood Shale.
Mr. Holberg, can we get summary reports from the York Region project, please, on the whatever calls have been made? Yes. Thank you.
And one more item. Hunger Awareness Week is coming up. I have a pledge sheet here. It's run through Feed the Need in Durham. We talked about hospital people can't afford parking. Well, there's a lot of people that don't have enough food to eat. I have a pledge form here. I suggest if you want to go to the website, you can contribute whatever you want, $5, $50, whatever. You want to contribute to this pledge form, that's great, but I sincerely say it's one of the most fundamental things we need. Because if you don't have food, you don't even have your health, you know? So I'd recommend Feed the Need in Durham, Hunger Awareness Need. Worthwhile organization. They work in conjunction with food banks. They do a really essential basic service, and we really do need it in Pickering and throughout Durham region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further other business? If you don't mind, I have a couple of items this evening. I don't usually do this to you, but I've got some good news I'd like to share with you, and just pass down these, if you will. For some time now, I've been working with Ontario Power Generation, expressing concern over the what happens as we move into the cycle of what's being referred to as retirement, but actually includes shutdown, layup, and decommissioning. So there are various phases to this. I'm very pleased to report this evening and to extend my appreciation on behalf of Council and the City to OPG that they have now confirmed a commitment to fund a City of Pickering financial and economic impact and land use study on the retirement of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station, which will include the questions around direct job losses, indirect job losses, land use redevelopment, and potential loss of tax revenues. So the fact that the City of Pickering will be managing this process, I think gives us all a degree of confidence, and that the OPG, in their ongoing commitment to this municipality, are willing to fund it, is something through which I believe we should extend our collective thanks. So I'm very pleased to share that with Council this evening. I'd also like you to know that as the Chair of CANIC, I will be interceding at the relicensing hearings for Pickering A and B. We have to submit our letters by April the 29th. I would like consensus of Council that in addition to appearing on behalf of CANIC, Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities, that I will be appearing as the Mayor of Pickering in support of the 5-year relicensing. If I don't hear any dissension, that's good. Thank you.
Wait, sorry. I have what is going to be said on behalf of the city of Pickering? At the region, we had a report with a letter that's coming forward.
Simply that we are in support of the 5-year renewal of the license for the Pickering Nuclear Generating Stations A and B. Nothing more. I think we're all in support of the relicensing. Okay, thank you. I'll take that as direction. Second item, I want to be a little careful about this. I've received notice of a complaint under the city's code of conduct regarding my involvement in the Durham West Arts Center and in the Image is Everything campaign. A member of the public has written to express a concern that my involvement with DWAC and the Image is Everything campaign violates the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. It doesn't. I think I'm very, very confident about that. And it certainly doesn't violate the Code of Conduct, which expressly supports members of council and their activities. As a matter of fact, we just had an example from Councillor Rodriguez, as he has encouraged everyone to support a local charitable organization or nonprofit organization. So, just like to make the point, if anyone wants to argue that any of us, councillor or mayor, has breached the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, then the correct procedure is to file their complaint with the Ontario Ombudsman, not with the City of Pickering, because the Municipal Conflict Act resides there, not here. I'd also like to point out that if you have concerns under the City of Pickering Code of Conduct, then you would file that complaint with the city clerk. And there are forms available on our website to do that, or if you don't wish to do that, you can come into the counter and pick up the hard copy. It's unfortunate that these things happen. Sometimes they're considered frivolous and vexatious. In the best of light, they're considered to come forward on behalf of a concerned citizen who may be somewhat naive or ill-informed. If this is politically instigated in any way, if any of these events, concerns are instigated politically, I can only say it's reprehensible. Having said that, I will take a confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Dickerson, seconded by Councillor McLean. All in favor? That's carried. Adjournment, Councillor Dickerson, Councillor O'Connell. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.